Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 225, Holloway versus the Korean Zombie, also probably known as UFC Singapore, as it is the UFC's first trip to that country this year. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, fresh back from UFC 292 at TD Garden in Boston, is Keith Shillan, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing, man?
Yeah, straight from the Gahden. I'm doing good, man. How you doing?
Good. From where I sat in front of my setup of multiple screens here at home, looking like an air traffic controller, it seemed like the guard was exploding last night.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, was that the feel?
Yeah. So the Garden just got, they have this thing they call it the hub, and it got all built up, and there's all these restaurants and stuff. So it's actually like a lot of bars, and it's actually pretty nice now near the Garden. And everybody, like, it was insane. If there was a Celtics game, there wouldn't have been as many Celtics shirts and jerseys than there was of O'Malley gear. I swear, like 9 out of 10 people walked in was wearing a Sugar shirt, funky here, you know. It was great. It was either that or Irish stuff for O'Malley and obviously Ian Gary. Yeah, it was wild. That people exiting was going crazy. O'Malley's a star, man. He is an absolute bona fide star.
Yeah, I mean, we had a whole, I did a whole recap with Dev standing in for you last night, kind of talking about O'Malley's star-making moments competitively, as well as kind of what it means for him and for the UFC going forward. So definitely don't want to rehash all of that when we could be talking about the upcoming card in Singapore. But just
That's
wanted
what
to get
want.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing that you mentioned that they've built the TD Garden up and made it more of that modern mega sports venue type thing. That's sort of a lifestyle and nightlife type venue, like the Dallas Cowboys complex here in Texas is
it's not that good. It's not that good,
but it's that kind of thing where the Cowboys complex is, was so expensive when they finished it that it had to be busy, something like 300 nights a year just to break even.
So Foxborough for the Patriots, now that's probably more like the Cowboys. That's really built. I mean, there's restaurants and there's there's a Patriots Hall of Fame. I mean, it's pretty dope. But this is just, it's more built up than it used to be. It used to be just an arena. Well, now they've added things around it. It's actually pretty good now.
And now that you mention it and you called it the hub, now I'm thinking back because during the UFC broadcast, John Anik referred to here from the hub so many times that I thought, and I'm not joking here, I thought, is this some nickname for Boston that I never knew about?
No, it is. It is. The hub is Boston. Okay. So they call in that area the hub too. But he's probably referring it as, when you say the hub, you're talking about Boston.
Okay. Just because if he was talking about just the complex, that's about as big a free promo for any place's tourism board that the UFC has done outside of Abu Dhabi. Because
no, John Anik is trying to seem cool. Like he's a New Englander, dude. You moved away, John Anik. Like, you don't get to claim it anymore.
He moved away, and now
I'm just kidding.
But now his Boston accent is like that old jersey that he only brings out on special occasions. Because when the UFC is in Chicago or Vegas, he just got that middle American sportscaster accent. But when they're in Boston, or he's talking about a fighter from Boston, that's when things become wicked.
It's funny because I didn't realize I had a really New England accent. Like, I mean, I don't hear it. I mean, you don't hear it. Like, I don't notice it. So the translator yesterday, I don't know who he was translating for. The Brazilian guy, does the Brazilian translations. He's wicked good, dude. I talked to him a couple of times, and he made a joke during the translation. He's like, "Sorry, we don't understand the Boston accent." He says it while we're during. I'm trying to remember whose interview it was, but
you're talking about like the young kind of sharp dressed guy, like Fabiano Buscai, that does the Portuguese. He's so good.
Yeah, he's wicked good. I forgot who he was translating for, but I asked the question, and he's like, "You gotta say that again. I don't understand your Boston accent."
That's amazing.
Or I think she said it, then he translated or something.
Oh.
I don't remember. I don't remember who it was now. I think it was early. It must have been like Natalia Silva, Karine Silva, or somebody. I don't know.
I'll have to go back and listen for that
Yeah.
one then. I would feel guilty doing any more dwelling on Boston when we've got a 13 fight card ahead of us.
Oh, let me say this though. Sorry, let me say this
please.
before I forget. I want to give a shout out to 2 different listeners. The first guy, I'm sorry, I didn't even get his name. His name was Jeff, and he was with a guy named Ryan, and they are a listener of the show. They ran into me. Wasn't planned, but that was super cool. And the other guy I want to give a shout out to, Brian Conley, is another listener, and I don't remember he was with a friend too. I don't remember his friend's name, but they watched the recap show. And yeah, Brian, the only thing is, dude, we're supposed to get some beers or something. The guy showed up at right at the first fight. I was like, come on, dude. This is the hub. This is the greatest city in the world. What are you doing? No, it is. Anyway, so shout out to those guys. They were all those guys super cool. I always like meeting anybody who listens to our show. I appreciate them.
That's awesome. Here from Boston, the UFC is doing a hard left turn and heading to Singapore. This is, I mean, the UFC has done a number of events in Singapore at this point. It's interesting to me, specifically Singapore and specifically Singapore Indoor Stadium. It is one championship's de facto home base. It's the equivalent of one championship coming and doing a show at T-Mobile Arena in Vegas. And it's kind of funny, the difference between how the two promotions view that, because when one championship did their first show on American soil earlier this year, they went to Broomfield, Colorado, to the arena that's basically standing where UFC 1 took place, and they brought out all the big guns. All their biggest stars specifically pointed towards an American audience. They're like, we'll give you a DJ versus Mariah's 3. We'll bring Stamp Fairtex. We'll bring Sage Northcutt. And the UFC going over there, it's a fight night card. We've got a rematch of an extremely one-sided fight in the co-main event, and we've got a couple of veterans of the road to UFC thing that nobody watched. It's UFC, it's leftovers night in Singapore.
I don't know how to say this in the nicest way possible. You're comparing Singapore and America. Getting the American market is probably a much bigger for a company than getting into. Oh, it absolutely. I don't know what the population of Singapore is.
But Singapore has a little bit of that Abu Dhabi thing, where it's small, but it's extremely wealthy, and it's kind of a tourist destination. So I think it's more to do with just the UFC is feeling pretty secure in its position in the industry.
Well, what I'm thinking is, if you're trying to get into Singapore, you figure one championship gets billions and billions of people to watch their shows, be in the arenas. So there's not much left over for the UFC. So that's probably why they're not going to waste all that time and just have an empty arena, because all the fans are selling out every one championship show.
That's probably it. I've kind of tipped my hand a little bit here in that I'm not super high on the quality of this card, period. I mean, we're talking about a 7-fight undercard, so 14 fighters, and I think 3 of the 14 are above 500 in the UFC. It's very much a Dana White's Saturday night, or Saturday morning, because it's a Singapore Contender Series thing to me. The main card, I mean, if I were to ask the stereotypical question, who on this card is closest to a title shot with a win, it's probably the winner of the Blanchfield versus Santos fight.
We'll get to that. I hate that fight is on this card. To me, that's probably the more contender matchup. Yeah, and it's the fight that I'm most interested in the entire card, including the main event. And it's going to happen at 8 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast. It's going to be 5 a.m. on the West Coast. And I know all the Europeans and all those people are going to at me oh, we watch it at that. Yeah, you know what? Don't live in a third world country. I know what to say. That's just a joke. For the first, if this is the first time you're ever watching, I make a joke and call any country. My wife is Canadian, born and raised in Canada, and I call Canada a third world country. It's a joke we do on this show where I call any country that's not American third world. So
yes,
don't at me. I love that Marcel Doff is the best. He lives it up. He's the best at it.
Yeah, Marcel Dorf like lives in the Netherlands. You know, he's probably used to a level of civilization that I, as a Texan, can only dream of. But you know, it's still third world. You know, and all I know about the Singapore card is I'm doing the play-by-play at least for the prelims, so I got to be up at like 4 a.m. Texas time for this. That's okay. It's a mixed bag. Shall we just dive right into these prelims? First up at UFC Singapore is a featherweight matchup between Seung Choi and Jarno Errens. Choi, the 30-year-old South Korean, is 10-6 overall. He is 3-5 in the UFC, and he is on a 3-fight losing streak. Fought most recently at UFC 281 last November, where he got plunked late in the first round by Mike Trizano. As some type of mitigating circumstance, Trizano did come in like 2 pounds heavy for that bout, but nonetheless, that was the third loss in a row for Choi, who is probably staring a pink slip in the face here in the form of Errens. 28-year-old from the Netherlands, incidentally, is 13-4-1 overall. He is 0-1 in the UFC. He made his debut at the second UFC Paris card last September, where he dropped a majority decision to local favorite William Gomez. So he'll be looking for his first UFC win. Choi looking again to snap an ugly losing streak. Choi is the favorite here. Choi is out there minus 200 or so. Errens around plus 170 on the comeback. I remember us previewing Errens' debut against William Gomez in Paris last year, and I looked at Errens. I watched what tape was available, and my feeling was that he was a kid with some physical tools who didn't seem ready for prime time and was kind of being set up as a sacrificial lamb to get Gomez a great looking victory in front of the Paris crowd. Because, you know, Gomez is a MMA factory guy. He is a flashy striker, but Errens kind of surprised me. I mean, my first couple bullet points about him that I had almost a year ago, tall, rangy, like spinning stuff, are still the case, but he gave Gomez a hell of a fight. You know, there was 2 rounds of pretty close kickboxing. I mean, I did give Gomez the first 2 rounds, but Errens was in it the whole time. He wasn't getting his doors blown off. And then round 3 was kind of a clinic on how to win a round off your back with submission attempts and offense. You know, he chained about 50 different subs on Gomez, had Gomez on kind of on the defensive and in reactive mode constantly, even though Gomez was the guy that looked like he was on top. It left me a little higher on the Dutchman. Whereas, you know, looking at Choi, we're talking here about a card that is headlined by the Korean Zombie, who, I mean, the Korean Zombie might be the last great example of the old school Korean fighter, because you and I both, you know, come from an era of MMA fandom long enough ago that we remember the stereotype of the Korean fighter. They, you know, super pathologically aggressive strikers on the feet who are also generally pathologically aggressive on the ground. A lot of them are, you know, long, rangy, skinny guys with good reach, but don't tend to use it very well to their advantage because they're so aggressive. Choi is another one of those throwbacks to me. He is a fighter in 2023 that still kind of fights like a 2007, like a product of the 2007, like South Korean gym scene. He's, you know, he's a wild striker. His problem in his, you know, in his fight with Mike Trizano, for example, is that Trizano was just as big as he was and just a more disciplined striker, kind of lit Choi up for, you know, for most of that first round. I see that Choi is a 2-1 favorite here, and I'm not feeling it. Give me the, you know, the young guy from the Netherlands, Jarno Errens, in a bit of an upset here. I just think he already looked like a more disciplined and composed striker than I expected him to be, despite his fondness for spinning stuff in his UFC debut. He's at an age where he might still be developing pretty strongly from one fight to the next. And with Choi, I'm just kind of done with him. Like, he's a guy who's been a lot of fun to watch for as long as he's been around, but any opponent with decent skills and a focused game plan has seemed to be able to take it to Choi. Yeah, give me Errens here in the, I guess, fairly substantial upset, but Choi tends to be pretty durable. So I don't think we're going to get a knockout here. A submission wouldn't surprise me too much. Again, Errens showed like pretty impressive submission offense off his back in that third round against Gomez. But I'm going to go with the decision here. Just give me Errens to actually make it look kind of easy in, winning maybe even all 3 rounds against Choi. And that might be it for Mr. Seung Woo Choi.
Yeah, so let me say this. I feel like I've been saying this a lot lately, but I'm going to say it again. Yeah, do not follow my bets this week because we don't make bets, but don't say, oh, Keith pick this guy, I'm picking him because my tape study was I think it was at all-time low. I was away from home a lot of this week, and so and not the biggest names on the card to be very familiar with. Choi, he's super inconsistent. I mean, he looked really good in fights against Yusuf Salal and Julian Arosa, but then he looked really bad against Alex Caceres, Josh Kulabau, Mike Trezano, which I is not that good of a loss of those 3. He's a big guy. You mentioned that. He's a long and lengthy guy. He's a counter-striking kickboxer. He's pretty accurate, but he does leave himself to be countered because he was like in the Trezano fight, he was really loading up on his left hand. He throws the left hand without any like setup. Now he used to feign a lot, but that wasn't the case recently, which I don't like. Now he also will fight in spurts where he'll wait, and then he'll burst in the pocket and throw hard shots. Sometimes that can be a good thing. Sometimes that can be a bad thing. A lot of long distance, rangy striking. The issue is, and this is where I think I'm going to disagree with you. You said that he's been pretty durable. I don't know about that. I mean, his last fight, I mean, he got knocked out by Mike Trezano, and Mike Trezano is, he isn't known to hit like Derek Lewis. You know what I mean? Now, because of his size, Choi can grind in the clinch. He's got pretty good dirty boxing, land knees and elbows in close. I'd say good takedown defense and pretty good get-up game, but not much of an offensive grappling. If he's on top because of his size, he can land some ground and pound. Now, Errens, the strike on the feet is he's a bit of a stationary target. I like that he was working the body in his last fight. He kept throwing the same straight right to the body, which I like. He does things that I hate, though. Like, he wastes a lot of energy by doing spinning wheel kicks, and he was trying to hit Gomez with this flying karate kick thing, which I don't like. He does hit hard. I'll give him that. He has a judo black belt, which right away when someone tells me they're a judo black belt, I go, okay, so they'll go for throws, but they don't care if they miss them and fall because that's the background. He's kind of a weak defensive wrestler, and he struggles to get back up. But like you said, he's a threat on his back. He's got 5 submission wins. I mean, if you remember the way the Gomez fight ended was Gomez was in a deep submission and really got saved by the bell. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not a fan of either. I agree with you. Like, Choi shouldn't be a 2-1 favorite over anybody.
Keith?
Yeah.
That is the name of this card. But, dude, there are 3 favorites of minus 700 or greater on this card. Okay,
I'll have to name. Okay, let me see if I can name real quick. Minus 700. I think Nakamura is going to be one of them. Oh shoot, that's the only one that's really jumping out to me is Holloway. Is he?
Holloway is another one of them.
Okay, and the other one, I have no idea.
Well, then it'll be a fun surprise when we get to it.
Negative 700 or more.
Yep.
Wow. I don't know. Parker Porter. I have no idea who the other person is. I know it's not Parker Porter, but
I'm gonna make you guess on a few of these.
But, okay. Yeah. All right. Back to what was I talking about? Yeah. Choi's durability worries me. Errens is newer on the scene, so I don't have a full grasp of him. he just doesn't have a lot of tools. So I'm going to go with the favorite, I guess. I'm going to say Choi wins a decision due to his size, and he's actually beaten some pretty decent guys in the past. So I'm kind of hoping that Choi is still there, and I'll say he wins by decision.
Next up on the UFC Singapore prelims is a women's flyweight matchup between Liang and JJ Aldrich. Liang, the 27-year-old from China, is 19-6 overall. She is 0-2 in the UFC since joining a little over 2 years ago. She has knockout losses to Ariane Carnelossi and Silvana Gomez Juarez in her 2 tries. The most recent of those, the Juarez loss, was at UFC 275 last June. So she's hoping to finally get her first octagon win in her 3rd try. Opposing her in that endeavor will be Aldrich. The 31-year-old fighting out of Colorado is 11-6 overall. She's 7-5 in the UFC. She is 4-4 since moving up from strawweight to flyweight. Worth mentioning that Liang is moving up from strawweight to flyweight, starting with this fight, by the way. So her first 2 fights in the UFC, both at 115 pounds. Here she's moving up to 125 in what can only be seen as a desperate attempt to get that first UFC win. Aldrich is on a 2-fight losing streak herself. She most recently appeared at UFC Fight Night, Jan versus Dvalishvili in March, where she dropped a unanimous decision to Ariane Lipski. Odds here, the books vary. There's a pretty wide range out there, but a good median would be that JJ Aldrich is minus 600, Liang plus 450.
What the? Oh my!
All right. Now, here's the thing. I'm completely with you on the JJ Aldrich on a 2-fight losing streak should not be minus 600 against anybody in the UFC. But if she is, it should be Liang, because Liang might be pound for pound the worst fighter in the UFC right now. I mean,
but you know, I thought you were going to ask me what the betting lines were, and I was going to say Aldrich. This is why I can't be like in the gambling. I was gonna say Aldrich minus 130. Like that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, it's Aldrich is minus 600. She's as high as minus 800 on some books. She's down around minus 500 on others. Again, when I'm talking about these odds a week out from fight night, usually I take the 4 or 5 most reputable outlets available in North America, and I kind of get a median there. Like I'm giving you a ballpark number because we know they're going to move a little bit. But here, yeah, calling Aldrich a 6-1 favorite, not an exaggeration at all. But I understand why, because Liang has just not shown much spark since she got to the UFC. When she got to the UFC, my feeling from seeing her work in Wulin Feng in China was that, okay, she's really tall and just kind of tall and willowy. She's not tall with like muscle on her frame. She's a submission specialist that I had the feeling was probably going to have trouble getting fights to the ground on her terms. And that's been borne out. You look at, I mean, she's gotten plunked in back-to-back fights by Ariane Carnelossi and Silvana Gomez Juarez. And I know that Ariane Carnelossi is one of our favorites, but it's not because she's a great fighter. She's a very limited fighter that we've probably already seen her ceiling, and she just effortlessly threw Liang around. Silvana Gomez Juarez, who was like 37 years old at the time, beat Liang to the punch repeatedly, and the power differential was ridiculous. Liang moving up to 125 pounds might solve some of the problems she's shown. Like, one of the problems she's demonstrated in the UFC is that she had a wild round 1 against Carnelossi, and she was completely gassed at the end of it. So maybe her gas tank will be a little better at 125. Maybe her chin will be a little better at 125, because Silvana Gomez Juarez basically put her out with 3 clean punches. But that's not like shoring up those most glaring deficiencies of hers isn't going to be enough to get past JJ Aldrich. Like, Aldrich is in a strange spot now where, even though she's coming into this fight off back-to-back losses to Blanchfield and Lipski, I think she's still improving. I think she's actually a better fighter than she was, say, 2 years ago when she was actually winning fights back-to-back-to-back. Aldrich, I thought she would be at a kind of power and physicality disadvantage after she moved up to 125. That really hasn't been the case. Like, she looks kind of unassuming, but she's not really gotten bullied around except for by very, very strong fighters like Erin Blanchfield. She's a decent boxer with decent power for strawweight, and she's sort of settled into a role where she's a good gatekeeper to that top 15. If you beat JJ Aldrich, you're decent. If you can't beat her, you're probably not that great. That's kind of what the kind of fighter she's panned into in her early 30s. And I think that's going to be more than enough to waste Liang Na. I expect Aldrich is probably going to knock her. I mean, Aldrich isn't hyper aggressive, and she's not a huge puncher, like in terms of one-shot power. So I think this probably goes into the second round, but I think Aldrich is just going to be able to tag Liang on the feet. Liang's either going to hang out on the feet and get destroyed, or if she's desperate to get this to the ground, she's going to have to do stuff like just pulling guard or jumping with bad guillotines. And Aldrich, I think, is savvy enough not to get guillotined or get over aggressive in Liang's guard and get armbarred. I think Aldrich probably just pounds out Liang on the ground in the second round after 8 or 9 minutes of one-way traffic. Give me Aldrich to, well, I mean, at least justify her position as a massive favorite.
Yeah, still thrown back by those betting odds. I just went over to the Fight Finder to look something up about JJ Aldrich. I love when you go to the Fight Finder, and it looks like she has a sunburn like on her face in the picture.
Yeah, she's got that. I feel bad anytime we use an after the fight photo for somebody's profile photo. Like, unless it's a cool one, unless it's like Henry Cejudo just bleeding, we had a great one of Carlos Condit like bleeding forever. But when it's just JJ Aldrich looking like somebody like rubbed her face in the grass.
No, she looks like me that one time I was drinking on the beach and fell asleep. And that's what she looks
like a lobster.
Yeah, not many people I can talk shit about. But man, compared to her, man, I might as well be Hispanic. I mean, holy Christ. Como estás, JJ? All right, so this fight, I mean, I don't know why I'm dissing the negative 600 favorite JJ Aldrich. So she's not a great athlete. I mean, which redheads are? She's a southpaw. He's a counter striker. You mentioned she's a boxer. You also mentioned that she can be trigger shy sometimes. But when she lets her hands go, I like her hands. She has pretty good hand speed. Her straight left is her best punch. I like that she goes to the body. I like when she goes by. She doesn't go to enough. You mentioned that she doesn't have power. That's probably like the one thing about her boxing I don't like. She's not a big power puncher. She's also like not good in the clinch. I mean, Sabina Miles would be in the clinch. Ariana Lipski, which is not like we talk about. You're saying she's better. She still lost to Ariana Lipski, which is surprising. She got beat up in the clinch there. I think she's an underrated offensive and probably a defensive wrestler. She's not your traditional, like she doesn't, chain wrestle or anything like that. She needs, like, I remember, I don't know what fight it was, but she was like going for a double and she didn't know how to like switch to a single and run the pipe or go to a back trip or something. But when she's had to defend takedowns, against like a Vanessa Demopoulos, she showed pretty good takedown defense. And I like against like Courtney Casey that she decided to out wrestle Courtney Casey, showing that she has a fight IQ. That could she have stood up and banged with Courtney Casey? Yeah, absolutely. But why take the chance? And when you go get someone like Courtney Casey, just turn it into a wrestling match. Nia Liang, she they say that she has a wushu experience. I don't know what that means, but I don't take that as a positive. You mentioned she's a bad striker. I mean, she was just defensively against Savannah Gomez Moore. She's just walking right into punches. Now she wants to wrestle, and I'd say I think her entries are a little better than you're gonna cry. I think her entries are okay, but she will shoot from too far away without a setup. She's really sloppy in her transitions. Like she'll chase a submission, but she'll lose position, and she doesn't scramble well. Now she's confident in her grappling. She'll pull guard, and she has a couple submissions on the regional scene off her back, kind of like arm bars and triangles. But I mean, this is not Mackenzie Dern, where if you're on top of her, you really have to worry. So Liang will want to get this fight to the ground, but I think Aldrich is the better offensive wrestler. I think she may stop some takedowns. I think Demopoulos is better wrestler than Liang. Like I think Demopoulos. Well, I shouldn't say better wrestler, but my point is that's a comparable matchup, and Aldrich did really well in that fight. On the feet, I think Aldrich picks her pot. Because of the lack of power, I could see a late stoppage where maybe she hits her, she tries to pull guard, she jumps on top and lands ground and pound, anything like that. But I see more like jab in, L step in, right hand, left hand, L step. I think I see a lot of that point fighting from the outside. Give me Aldrich by decision.
And some of you might have picked up on Keith asking a low-key trivia question earlier in this segment. He's like, what redhead is a great athlete? The answer, of course, would be Jason the Athlete McDonald.
Oh, nice job.
And hey, and that completes full circle because he is from the noted third world country of Canada. So
there you go. Nice job.
We head now to the welterweight division for a matchup between the debuting Billy Goff and Yusaku Kinoshita, a meeting of veterans of the 2022 season of Dana White's Contender Series. Goff, the 25-year-old from Connecticut. Is it Groton? Is it I don't know. I don't know.
It's Groton.
Groton. There were only two possible ways it could have been pronounced, and I fucking got it wrong. God, from Groton, is 8-2 overall. This will be his UFC debut. As I mentioned, he beat Szymon Szmatricki on the Contender Series last August, knocked him out in the first round. He had been scheduled to make his debut against Themba Gorimbo back in February. Goff withdrew from that one. I believe it was an illness or injury on his part. So here he's making his long delayed debut a little over a year after his win on the Contender Series. And he'll be meeting Kinoshita, a castmate from that same season. 22-year-old from Osaka, Japan, is 6-2 overall. He is 0-1 in the UFC. He fought on the Contender Series last August as well. Got a third-round knockout of Jose Enrique Souza to earn a UFC contract. Made his debut in February. I believe it was even the exact same card that Goff was supposed to be on, but he got knocked out late in the first round by Adam Fugit. So he is still looking for his first UFC win as well. He is slightly to moderately favored to get it done. Kinoshita is -150, Goff +120 on the comeback. Keith, I'm going to hand this over to you first, but there's something I just want to get out there for any of our listeners, whether they're longtime listeners or it's their first, their first time listening to one of our previews. I'm always hesitant to bad talk fighters. That's not what I'm here to do. If I didn't like fighters, if I didn't like the sport, I wouldn't cover it for a living. It doesn't pay that well. But I think there's room for honesty. So, I don't know, saying someone.
So why don't you be honest, Ben, and tell them what you really make?
Well, does free use of the Sherdog private helicopter count against my salary? Or
yeah,
that. I mean, between that and the dental plan, I'm definitely in the mid six figures. But I'm not being insulting when I say fighter A is not UFC material if they've demonstrated themselves not to be. Doesn't mean they're a bad fighter. It doesn't mean they're not worthy of respect. But this fight is an indication of kind of what's become of Dana White's Contender Series. And because of that, what's become of UFC undercards in general. Here we have a guy who is 0-1 coming out of the Contender Series, and he's favored to beat someone else from that very same season. They're jumping right into one of the three probably deepest divisions in the UFC. And I have the feeling that probably neither of these guys is UFC ready at this point. One of them being just 22 years old. There's more obvious upside there, especially when you look at his physical tools. But yeah, this is a perfect example of Dana White's Saturday Night Contender Series. Let me know if you see it any different, if you see more to be excited about either of these guys, and tell me who you think wins.
Well, let's be honest, Ben, you've always not liked Japanese fighters or fighters from Connecticut.
It's exactly it. I can't,
you've-
dude. I'm gonna unload on Parker Porter when we get
Yeah,
there.
you've always hated Japanese people living in Connecticut,
Oh yeah,
but you really hate Connecticut people living in Japan.
yes, yeah. I mean, however many there are, I can't stand them.
So Kinoshita, I like that he's like 22 years old. So I like that. Again, I know we've talked about Asian fighters.
He'll be 23 by the time everyone's listening to this. Like tomorrow was literally his birthday.
Oh, happy birthday!
Yeah,
maybe it's probably tomorrow already in Japan.
Yeah, it might be 3 days from now. It might be Wednesday in Japan by now. Like, I'm not sure how time zones work.
Happy birthday, Mr. Kinoshita. Now that he's 23, I don't like him anymore.
Yeah.
So he's a southpaw, very karate style. He has a wide stance. He pressures forward. It's a controlled pressure. He's not a maniac. He's a counter striker, slip and rip guy. I love his slide back left hand. He's got some mean kicks, but he has a lot of defensive holes. He keeps his chin high in there. He hangs his hands. Not much of a ground game. He's a weak defensive wrestler. Struggles to get off the bottom. Took some mean shots from Adam Fugit. And he does have some submission wins on the bottom, but nothing to be too excited about. Billy Goff, he's not a great athlete, but he is a tough as nails kind of guy. He's a guy that I've watched on the regional scene a lot. We saw on the Contender Series, even he ate a high kick immediately in the fight, somehow recovered to come back and win that fight. So he's got a lot of hot. He's a kickboxer with a high output. He beats guys with pressure. He's the opposite. He wants to brawl. He wants to get in the pocket. He wants to be wild. He wants to, he can be wild. He can overthrow his shots, leave them to be countered. But he's got good power. He's got TKO wins over some good fighters. Gary Boletto's a good regional fighter that could be, we talk about lower level UFC guy. He's a guy like that. Justin Sumner, same thing. He's been in the Contender Series. Now he has some defensive holes. He drops his hands. He keeps his chin high in the air. If he gets in the pocket, he can start clinching, and that's where he's really good. He butchered Sumner with elbows inside. He'll sneak a takedown or two, but he's definitely not a wrestler at all. But he's got a good get-up game if you hold him down, but he doesn't have any submissions. I think this is going to be a striking battle. I don't think Kinoshita will want to get the fight to the ground. But if it is taken down, I think Goff could maybe possibly wrestle, but most likely I think they strike it on the feet. Kinoshita is definitely the cleaner, more technical striker. That feedback left hand, especially the way Goff pressures, he could walk right into something like that. Very similar to what we just saw Sean O'Malley do to Aljamain Sterling. But Goff, of the two, has the power. I never go New England, but I'm going to go with the upset. I think Goff eats some shots because of his pressure. But I think that pressure is eventually going to get to Kinoshita, and I think Goff's going to catch him. And I say Goff wins by second round TKO.
Nice. I can definitely see that. Like Goff's film regionally I was more impressed than I expected to be. I didn't have any specific duties to do with his Contender Series appearance. So the first time I really watched any tape on him was in the past couple days, because he dropped out of his February fight early on enough that I hadn't really gotten into preview mode for that. But yeah, I was specifically impressed by his performance against Gary Boletto Jr., which was probably one of the better guys he beat on the regional level. Once I went back to see it, I remembered his fight against Robson Gracie Jr. in his one fight in Bellator. And then, he looked good on the Contender Series as what Sherdog associate editor Jay Petrie would call a New England style face first striker, who nonetheless got the job done. I can feel the upset pick here. I mean, I'd been kind of waffling back and forth, throughout the last few days as I analyzed this fight. I'm going with Kinoshita here, just as the guy who I think has a few more high-end physical tools, and a guy that, as such a young fighter, may show some physical maturation and some skill developments that will be That'll be greater than what Goff has shown, even though his has been a longer absence. So give me Kinoshita to get it done here by decision, but I don't have a whole lot of confidence in this, and it may become obvious pretty quickly that you were right with the upset pick here. We stay in the welterweight division for a matchup between Seung Kenan and Rolando Bedoya. Seung, the 33-year-old from China, is 19-7 overall. He is 4-3 in the UFC. He's on a 2-fight losing streak, dating back 2.5 years and change. He fought most recently back in March at UFC 285, where he was knocked out late in the third round by Ian Gary after close to 3 rounds of pretty one-sided work by the Irish phenom. Prior to that, he had a quick first-round knockout loss at the hands of Max Griffin, part of Griffin's kind of mid-career resurgence when that took place back in 2021. So Seung definitely has some work to do to get back on track here. He'll try to get it done against Bedoya. The 26-year-old Peruvian is 14-2 overall. He's 0-1 in the UFC. He made his debut at UFC 288 in March, brought, I think, a 10 or 11 fight win streak into that fight, took on Chaos Williams, and came out on the wrong end of a split decision, but nonetheless seems to have made a good impression because he is a big favorite in this fight. Bedoya is coming into this fight around minus 275, Seung plus 220, and I can understand why, because Bedoya looked pretty good against Chaos Williams. I spoke a little earlier when we were previewing the Seung-Woo Choi fight about the stereotype, now kind of an obsolete stereotype about the South Korean fighter. I feel sometimes as though Peruvian fighters are stepping in to fill that void. Like most of the prospects that come out of Peru, meaning not just that they're Peruvian, but they've been training in Peru and they got most of their regional experience in Peru, Ecuador, Colombia. They tend to be really aggressive strikers who, once they make it to kind of top level promotions, they need to shore up some deficiencies in their striking defense and their gas tank before we can really see where they're going to pan out. That's how I felt about Bedoya coming into the Chaos Williams fight. Just I feel like I remember myself saying that Bedoya got to this point and racked up a huge win streak, but leaning on a lot of behaviors, they're going to get him clocked in the UFC and probably going to get him clocked right away by someone like Chaos Williams. And you know what? I was right and I was wrong. He lost that fight, but this dude has got a beard on him because he took a couple of flush shots, especially in the third round when he was pretty tired from, I mean, if you tell me right now that Chaos Williams is the hardest one-punch hitter at 170, I might not agree, but I'm not going to laugh at you. He's up there, and he clocked Bedoya with 2 or 3 flush punches in the third round, and Bedoya walked through him. I came out of that fight impressed with him.
Who would you put as it? Besides Jeff Neal?
I mean, Jeff Neal is...
There's probably someone obvious pick we're not thinking of.
There's probably an obvious pick we're not thinking of, but...
Jake Shields.
Yeah, for sure. Like, oh, so Bedoya, he's still young. He's just 26 years old, got a wealth of experience. His ground game, the flashes of his ground game I've seen, it's kind of a quick strike thing. Like he likes looking for kind of opportunistic submissions in transition. Like he's happy to take the back. He's happy to grab a front headlock and work for, a Darce choke or whatever. But if that's not coming, he's not the type of guy that wants to set up shop in another guy's guard and go to work from there. He seemed more inclined to stand up and get back to punching. I think even the version of him that lost to Williams would have been too much for Seung. I was never super high on Seung Kenan, even before he kind of settled into this rut of fighting once a year. But here, I mean, he's aged from his mid-20s to his early 30s under the UFC's, lights. And he's still always been kind of the same guy. He's a hard hitter. He's aggressive on the feet, but he's porous in defense himself. He's decent size for the division, but I don't think he's a standout athlete. And I've seen him, if not bullied, at least matched strength for strength by fighters that didn't look like they should be able to do so. Like, Seung just kind of is what he is. And if Bedoya is the prospect I think he is, I think he kind of marches through him. I understand why the line is what it is. And I think Bedoya probably gets his first UFC win here. And if he gets it, I think he gets it in emphatic fashion. Seung's durability is definitely, it's fair to call it into question, as he's only fought like twice in the last 3 years plus, and he got knocked out both times. Give me Bedoya to knock out Seung in the first round here and kind of announce himself as a new person of interest in the UFC welterweight division.
Yeah, so I was looking at the welterweight rankings because if I had to make a vote, talking just UFC, Joaquin Buckley maybe.
There you go, Joaquin Buckley. We think about the kicks, but his punches are brutal as well. That's a good one.
Jeremiah Wells is another one I wouldn't want to get punched by.
Yeah.
Obviously Jeff Neal. Anyways. So Kenan Seung, he's a big guy. He's a really big guy for the weight class. Boxer, but he can have lack of volume at times. He does have a nice power jab, a good straight right, powerful left hook. I'd say he's got pretty good power, big kicking game. I like his high kick. I love his spinning attacks. He's a very physically strong guy when you look at him. Not much of an offensive grappler. He defends takedowns by jumping guillotine, which I hate. I go back to like the Derek Krantz fight where he got picked up and got slammed. He's hard to hold down, like him that, and he's got pretty good cardio. Like he beat Krantz by pushing a hard pace. The problem is, I mean, his offensive tools they're not bad, but it's his chin right now. I mean, Max Griffin knocked him out in the last fight. Ian Machado Gary knocked him out in the last fight. Now both those are not bad losses by any means, and that's those two guys are much higher level than Bedoya is at least at this point of his career. I didn't get to talk about Ian Machado Gary, but I said it in the previous show. I'm all in on that kid. I'm still all in. So I'm now that we pull back the curtain a little bit. We have our Sherdog rankings where a couple of us vote. I'm the one who's saying that Ian Machado Gary needs to be ranked in our Sherdog rankings. Now, of course, when we talk about the rankings, I remind everyone we do the entire world, so that's why it's a little different than UFC rankings, where he's probably already going to be in the rankings. Bedoya, high output striker. I like that he can fight out of both stances. You mentioned he's a bit of a brawler. He's got some pop though. Like he can hit. Good kicks. I like his teep kicks. Good hard body kicks. I like that he adds kicking with his combinations, like end combinations. You mentioned his chin, and I'm always like, man, when you compliment someone's chin, it's like a backhand compliment because you're also saying, oh, he's also very hittable, because he drops his hands, he keeps his chin high in the air, he backs straight up on the center line. So why he 8 punches from Chaos Williams, it's still like I'd rather not know what his chin was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I got to feel better about that. He throws naked, like I talk about. He's got a lot of kicks, but he throws naked like it, so he could be counted for that. I like that he will wrestle. Now, he needs to improve his top. Like he's more like you can tell he's a guy who picked up wrestling later on when we started going to MMA than the guy with a wrestling background. But he has 3 submission wins, so I like that. You seem much higher on Bedoya than I am. I'm not that high on the guy, but I would go with him just because I like his output more. I like that he has the ability that he could get a takedown and steal around. I'm gonna say Bedoya wins. I'm gonna say he wins by decision.
Next up, the middleweights take the cage as Chidi Njokuani looks to get back on track against Michal Oleksiejczuk. Njokuani, the 34-year-old Nigerian-American fighting out of Las Vegas, is 22-9 with 1 no contest overall. He is 2-2 since joining the UFC out of the 5th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He, of course, already had a long and well-traveled veteran career behind him at that point, and made a bit of a surprise splash in the UFC last year. Debuted with first round knockouts of Marc-Andre Barriault and Duško Todorovic before running into a wall, or at least a speed bump, in the form of Gregory Rodriguez and Albert Duraev, who have handed him back-to-back losses. The most recent of those, the Duraev loss, was a split decision at UFC on ESPN Vera versus Sandhagen back in March. So Njokuani looking to get back in the win column here, and so is his opponent, Oleksiejczuk. 28-year-old Pole is 18-6 with one no contest overall. He is 6-4 with one no contest in the UFC. He is 2-1 since moving down to middleweight. He debuted in the UFC as a, frankly, visibly undersized light heavyweight. He dropped to middleweight about a year ago, and since then he has knockout wins over Sam Alvey and Cody Brundage, and a second-round submission loss to Caio Borralho. The most recent of those, the Borralho fight, was at the UFC on ESPN Seung versus Simone card back in April. The odds on this one are quite close, closest on the card so far. Oleksiejczuk is your slight favorite, though. He's minus 125 or so, and Njokuani available at even money, plus 100. Keith, obviously, Chidi Njokuani was a bit of a pleasant surprise when he dropped into the UFC last year and started breaking people off. Are we just seeing him regressing to the mean, and this is the real Chidi Njokuani, the guy that has now lost back-to-back fights? Or is there still some spark left in him, and is Michal Oleksiejczuk the guy to show it against?
Those are good questions. I think he's lost to good guys. So I do think there's a lot left in him. Now, is Oleksiejczuk the guy to do it against? I don't know. I mean, this is a really, really good matchup. I like both the guys, especially in the stand-up. I'm surprised that this fight is this low on the card. Like, if we joke about my job of making the order, I would have this fight way up, like maybe fourth from the top. Like this, so
fourth from the top is Fernie Garcia. I mean,
you gotta give the people what they want. Yeah,
you can't bump the Fern, and I mean, if you move another fight to the main card, then I mean, what's happening to Junior Taffa versus Parker Porter? I mean, Keith, there's a lot of moving parts here, man.
Yeah,
you got to give the people what they want.
Yeah, you can't make everybody happy, I guess. So back to this fight as I'm trying to kill time because I accidentally clicked down on my notes. Chidi Njokuani, he's this very long, lengthy guy. He's got really long arms, really long legs, really good striker. Very relaxed and calm in his striking. I love that he switches stance in mid combination. That's something I always talk about for the top guys. Excuse me. Issue that be is he can be gun shy sometimes. A little. What he has actually in him a lot sometimes is that what we saw Sean O'Malley in the first round, where it's a lot of feints, a lot of hip feints, a lot of, but not throwing. Like throw, dude. Like you feint. You have to go every once in a while. I was working with my son in feinting and wrestling. And I'm getting to practice, and I'm like, well, you got to shoot too, buddy. Like, don't just do that. Like, it works better. So that when he's in the pocket, I like that he starts turning inside and he starts slicing elbows. That's something really nice that he does. Nice, serious. So if you try to crowd him too much, he's got serious power. If he touches you, he can put you out, both his hands and his feet. I like his clinch game. He can grind inside there. Because of how good his striking is, he doesn't get enough credit for his grappling. I mean, he's a BJJ black belt, which again, take that with what it's worth. It doesn't mean the same thing as it used to, but I just mean he out-grappled Mario Sousa in the Contender Series. He almost caught Duško Todorovic with an anaconda. So that's the things I'm talking about. Like I used to always think of him as like kind of like a fish when it hits the ground. That's not the case at all. No, don't get me wrong.
That's Anthony Njokuani.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. His defensive wrestling is still very bad. So he's easy to get taken down. But he showed his ability to get back up. Like, go back to the Todorovic fight. Todorovic had struggled to keep him down. And he showed against Mario Sousa in the Contender Series. He's got some mean grinded power. Now, Oleksiejczuk, he's a southpaw fighter that it's all pressure. He's on the gas. Was really good at forcing his opponents on their back foot, and then not only forcing them back, but then when they get near the cage, not letting them escape, beating them to the point of escape and landing there. Really good volume. Tends to fight in bursts where he's coming in and he's tackling combination. Now he can get wild. He'll wing some shots. He wings that overhand left where sometimes he almost just throws it to close the distance to get into that pocket. Like he'll throw it from the outside, almost that kicking range to get to the pocket where he can unload. One of the best body punchers in the UFC. He goes onto the body. He's got good power. Now, defense to him is always like second option. And that's because he's so aggressive. He's willing to walk into shots, willing to eat a shot, to take one. I don't know if that would be a smart case or a smart idea against someone like Chidi and Njokuani. But if he goes with that strategy, we should have a hell of a fight. As short as it lasts. I think he's also, like we talking about Chidi's grappling. I think until Oleksiejczuk, he was so bad before that he's made a lot of improvements in the grappling, and we still think of him as this bad wrestler. I think he'll go for some takedowns. Now he's not a great defensive wrestler, but again, like I think that's something has to do like when he gave us 6 takedowns or 7 or 10 takedowns, something like that to Jim Crute, which didn't look good. But since then, he's done pretty good stopping takedowns. Now he struggled to get off the bottom, and he's been subbed a few times, but it's been a while. So I think this is a fantastic stylistic matchup. Like I mentioned, I think it's way too far down the card. Both guys have their back against the wall. Especially in Njokuani. And I still think both guys have something left. I'm going to go with – who'd you say that – I just –
Oleksiejczuk is just the slightest favorite. He's like minus 120, minus 125. Okay. Yeah.
All right. That I'm actually surprised. The reason I said that, I was going to say I'm going with the upset. I'm going with Oleksiejczuk, so I guess I'm going with the favorite. He's going to have to get past Njokuani's legs, and I know that's going to be tough. But when he gets in the pocket, I like his volume more, and I like his opportunistic wrestling. And, I think it's not many people he's going to have an edge in wrestling. But if he decides to wrestle, I actually think this is the opponent he could win. Now, I'm not talking about all grappling. I mean, just simply the takedowns. I think we have a war, but I say Oleksiejczuk wins the decision.
Yeah, this was it's one of the closer matched fights on the card, as you can tell by the line. Like I said, this card is full of 3-1 or greater favorites, and it has several 5-1 or greater favorites. This was one of the more enjoyable fights on the card for me to actually break down and prepare for. Like I was more excited about it after doing tape study and kind of reviewing my old notes than I was before, which that's always a good thing, because there are some fights that by the time I'm done watching tape, I'm not even that excited to watch the fight. But this was not one of those. There are interesting kind of contrasts and parallels between these guys, because if you'd asked me 2 years ago, like if you'd asked me, 2 years ago, like 2 years ago was right ahead of Njokuani's entry on the Contender Series. If you'd asked me for the Cliff's notes on Chidi and Njokuani, I would have been like, well, at this point, he's the more accomplished Njokuani brother for what that's worth. But yeah, he's just an exciting, inconsistent / underachieving journeyman who'll, never make it to the UFC, or if he does at this point, it's almost too late. He's like 32 years old and he has, 25 or 30 MMA fights and like probably 60 or 80 Muay Thai fights. Like it's over. Having seen what he's done in the UFC, even taking into account the losses against Rodriguez and Duraev, I think now more that he is a talented and skilled fighter who wasted way too much of his career trying to cut to 170. Like he's big for 185. He's tall. He's not especially skinny. He is a big dude, and he just killed himself for years and years trying to cut to 170. And I think that even contributes a little to his approach. Part of the reason he's so relaxed in MMA striking is probably because he does have so much kickboxing and Muay Thai experience. And a lot of guys that come from that realm, they have all the tools and maybe lack the urgency for, 3-5 minute rounds of MMA until they develop it. But also guys that probably walk around at 210 pounds, but fought at 170 for a lot of their career often develop a fight style where they fight like they're guarding their gas tank and their chin. And
That's fair.
I've looked back at some of Njokuani's highlights and lowlights in light of that, and I kind of wonder if we'd have a different story on the guy if he just settled in at 185 all along. I mean, that's in the past. He's going to turn 35 this year. He kind of is what he is, and what he is surprisingly good and entertaining, as we always knew he was. Oleksiejczuk comes from the opposite direction. Like from the time he dropped into the UFC, it was like, well, he's a surprisingly good striker and surprisingly hard hitter who seems undersized for light heavyweight. And he seems undersized specifically in a way that this guy just looks like a middleweight out of camp. Like he looks like fit, but not ripped.
Yeah.
He's shorter than all of his foes. He's got like a little bit of the spare tire around him. And I think he has a new lease on life since dropping to 185. Like he looked sensational in putting away Sam Alvey and Cody Brundage. And while neither of those guys is maybe at the highest level, he did what an elite 185-pound striker is supposed to do to those guys. And then losing to Caio Borralho, I don't think there's any shame in that. Caio Borralho is a possible future champ at 185. He's looked like an absolute world beater. So I like the move to 185 for Oleksiejczuk. But I think this is a sneaky difficult matchup for him, because if he tries to just operate in boxing range, like he prefers to at his best, he's going to be dealing with someone in Njokuani that is at least as hard a hitter, just shot for shot in terms of punching, is going to have reach on him, has decent footwork, and has a much more diverse kicking game and willingness to use it. If Oleksiejczuk recognizes that he can take down Njokuani with ease and decides to do so, I think this might turn into a surprisingly easy night of work for him. But I'm going with the upset here, and I'm kind of banking on Oleksiejczuk not to fight to his best advantage until maybe it's too late. I think Oleksiejczuk kind of tries his luck on the feet, doesn't like what he gets from Njokuani, and I don't think Njokuani is going to knock him out in the first round or anything, but I could see Oleksiejczuk like getting hurt by Njokuani, getting his legs and body kicked, getting punished, by Njokuani grabbing the clinch and elbowing and kneeing him when Oleksiejczuk tries to move into boxing range. Give me Njokuani to, probably win rounds 1 and 2 and hold on in round 3 to pick up a decision in a real fun fight and pick up the small upset here. Next up on the UFC Singapore prelims is a men's bantamweight matchup between Toshiomi Kazama and Garrett Armfield. Kazama, the 26-year-old from Japan, is 10-3 overall. He is 1-1 since joining the UFC out of the Road to UFC program that the promotion launched last year. He won his quarterfinal, then came back and fought in a regular UFC event at the Lewis versus Spivak card in February, where he got plunked by fellow Road to UFC product Rinya Nakamura, who appears a little further up this card, in just 33 seconds. So Kazama didn't get a chance to show much of anything in his flagship UFC debut. He's going to try to change that against Armfield, who probably feels a little bit of the same way. 26-year-old Missouri native is 8-3 overall. He is 0-1 in the UFC. He made his debut last July at the Dos Anjos versus Fiziev card, where he got choked all the way to sleep in the second round by David Onama. So he will be back at 135 pounds, where he probably belongs after that featherweight debut, and looking for his first win in the octagon. He is actually a favorite to get it done. He is minus 180, Kazama plus 140 or so on the comeback. Keith, at 135 or 145, I mean, this one's at 135. The burden of proof is on the fighter in question to show that they even belong in the UFC. I mean, the UFC has 50 or 60 fighters in each of those divisions, and not many of them are chumps. Do you see staying power in the UFC for either or both of these guys? And who gets it done on Saturday?
Yeah, so this is one of those fights where I said, do not follow my pick, because I definitely did not do enough tape study on these two guys, especially especially Armfield. What I've seen at Armfield, minus athlete, but he has good volume. I like that he saves his energy because he just touches out there in the striking. He doesn't really wind up on a lot of things. I like that when he gets to the pocket, he that's where his he's more comfortably tight inside striking. I haven't seen too much of his offensive wrestling, but his defensive wrestling is pretty weak. And you mentioned like he was submitted by David Onama. Onama's pretty good, but still like that's not a good debut. Kazama, he's a pretty strong guy, like physically strong. He pressure fights, throws a lot of hard winging shots. That's to close the distance. Now he sits on his punches, so he draws some power. But I'm worried about his durability. I mean, he was blasting in 33 seconds on his last fight. But he likes to close the distance. To get to his judo. He's got a judo background. He can also shoot for some takedowns. He likes upper body throws. Has some trips. Pretty good at winning scrambles. I've seen in one fight he'll even like pull guard and try to sweep because he's pretty good on the ground. I like his top control. I like that he has a very like Dagestani style where he looks to like leg lace and looks for the Dagestan handcuffs. He's a submission threat. He's got 5 subs, and I like his cardio. Again, it would probably one of these fights, if I had more time, I would have definitely looked at Armfield a little bit more. But I'm going to go with the upset. I'm taking Kazama. I like his grappling. That's one thing I know that he can do. I've seen Armfield, struggle on the ground a little bit. I think Kazama's going to close the distance. I think he's going to find a way to get the fight to the ground. I think his scramble ensues, and I think he's going to lock on a submission. I say Kazama wins by second round submission.
I like the pick there, and I'm leaning the same direction you are. Armfield, I agree that stepping up on short notice to take on David Onama, it's a bit of, I guess, poetic justice because Onama, of course, made his own debut in the UFC up a weight class on short notice. Was it Mason Jones at lightweight, something like that? Or, and you and I both said, hey, Onama's good. He was going to be in the UFC or at least on the Contender Series pretty soon anyway. So even if he loses this debut, he might stick around. To an extent, a lesser extent, I feel the same way about Armfield. Stepping up to fight Onama up a weight class on day's notice was a big ask. And at 135, he might have a future. He's like you said, decent athlete, decent power in his punches, okay wrestler, but I see more upside in Kazama. And I think Kazama just had a really, really rough matchup against Rinya Nakamura in February. Like Kazama, to go against a guy who was just stronger, more athletic, and a better wrestler, yeah, it left him without much place to go. I think he's better than that showing. And I think he gets it done against Armfield here as well. Give me Kazama probably to take down Armfield and get most of his work done on the ground. You mentioned, he has good offensive wrestling, which a lot of it, is judo style stuff, trips, upper body throws. But once things are on the ground, when you have a judo fighter, it's sometimes a mixed bag. And you've pointed out why. It's because in a lot of competition judo, there's limited time to work on the ground. So, fighters don't really build up a solid.
Plus, don't forget what Matt Hughes says, that judo guys are guys who weren't tough enough to wrestle.
Exactly. What a great piece of trash talk. Like that goes up there.
Just for those judo people out there, I literally bring my son to a judo and wrestling school. I'm a supporter of judo. So
yeah. But Kazama, once things are on the ground, he's not one of those judo ground game disappointments. He's good at taking the back. He has a diverse submission attack because the kind of the stereotype of the judo convert to MMA is, it's all Kimuras and arm bars. But no, he's a good scrambler. Well conditioned for a guy that has a pretty high energy style, especially on the ground. He's shown a good gas tank. Yeah, I think he probably, like, if if only one of these guys is still in the UFC 2 years from now, I think it's probably Kazama. And I think he will be a little too much for Armfield here. Give me Kazama to maybe win all 3 rounds just with superior grappling, surprisingly easy takedowns, and probably a fight full of fun groundwork. Next up at UFC Fight Night 225, and at least as the card is set up as of the beginning of fight week, the top prelim is a heavyweight matchup between Waldo Cortes-Acosta and Lukasz Brzeski. Cortes-Acosta, the 31-year-old Panamanian by way of Arizona, is 9-1 overall. He is 2-1 since joining the UFC out of LFA and out of the 2022 season of Dana White's Contender Series. His lone professional loss came in his last fight. He was 9-0 going into his tilt with Marcos Rogerio de Lima back in April at the Seung versus Simone card. He ended up on the wrong end of a unanimous decision. So he'll be looking to get back in the win column. And if you ask him, probably hoping to start another 9-fight win streak. And he'll start it against Brzeski. The 31-year-old Pole is 8-3-1 with 1 no contest overall. He is 0-2 since joining the UFC out of the 2021 season of Dana White's Contender Series. He won on the Contender Series. That win was overturned when he tested positive for a banned substance afterwards. He was allowed to keep the contract nonetheless, but he has been doing his best to lose his job ever since, with back-to-back losses to Martin Buday and Carl Williams. The most recent of those, the Williams fight, was back in March, so he's stepping back into the cage here after 5 months and change. Still looking for his first official win in the octagon. Keith, who's the favorite?
I have no idea. Cortez?
You are correct. Your favorite is Waldo Cortes-Acosta, and it ain't close. He is minus 300.
What?
Plus 225.
Oh, my Lord.
All right.
Have they seen Cortez fight? He's not good.
He's not good, but I tell you, well, here, I'll there are a couple factors at play when I make my pick here. One is, if you've been listening to the Shillan and Duffy previews for any amount of time at all, you know that I'm pretty adamant about adopting a wait and see attitude towards fighters that come out of Asia, CIS, Middle East, Brazil, some parts of continental Europe, especially if they are jacked and getting by on just pretty obvious physical diesel. I always want to wait a couple of cycles. I'm just going to call it like it is. Like, they're coming from places where steroids aren't cheating. They're coming to a place where they are cheating, at least officially. And all of a sudden, cycling becomes part of your training regimen. And I don't mean getting on the exercise bike, with the rubber sweats on. If you look at Lukasz Brzeski's Fight Finder photo, he's not quite Jake Collier in the terms of like being the bad Tinder date of MMA fighters, but that photo was taken maybe a year before his appearance on the Contender Series, and he does not look like the same man. Like, I'm not that terribly surprised that he tested positive for a banned substance, and I'm not terribly surprised that he hasn't really shown a whole lot since against 2 guys in Buday and Williams that are pretty limited fighters. Brzeski, as a regional fighter, was actually not a huge heavyweight. He's 6'2", and he weighed in around 235 or 240 for most of his fights, but he was pretty fast. He was an aggressive striker. He hit hard, and he was willing to shoot a takedown and finish fights with ground and pound if the opportunity presented itself. But he's not really had opportunities to even try to make that go against Martin Buday or Carl Williams. And all Buday really has going for him is being absolutely huge. And Williams is a pretty skilled medium-sized heavyweight, who was fighting at 205 2 years ago. Cortes-Acosta is the perfect example of my axiom that at heavyweight, all you need is one decent tool and the willingness to employ it, because Cortes-Acosta, I stopped short of even saying he's a good striker. I'll just say he's one of the few heavyweights who commits to throwing the jab, and it's a decent jab. And that was enough to get him to 9-0 and 2 wins in the UFC. Against Marcos Rogerio de Lima, who's a good striker with good power and more athletic than he looks, it wasn't enough. Marcos Rogerio de Lima's Achilles heel is still his defensive wrestling and defensive grappling. Cortes-Acosta couldn't take advantage of it. Here, I think he's probably just going to outpoint Brzeski in a terrible fight. For as long as it stays on the feet, I think his jab and his occasional cross will be in Brzeski's face. I'm not sure Brzeski will be able to take him down if he tries. And as this thing wears on, even though Cortes-Acosta is the bigger guy, he's the guy that pushes the heavyweight limit, and he doesn't look like he's in the best shape in the world, I would expect him to be the fresher fighter in the 3rd round as well. So give me Waldo Cortes-Acosta to probably win 2 rounds out of 3, maybe all 3 rounds in kind of a lousy, plodding heavyweight. I don't even want to call it a slobber knocker because I don't think much slobber is going to get knocked. It's just going to be it's going to be the most Chase Sherman fight that didn't have Chase Sherman in it ever.
Oh God, why would you throw Chase Sherman's name on? Man, while he was talking, I was looking at Lukasz Brzeski's like 2 pictures, like one when he was like super ripped, and then a recent picture. It looked like Israel Adesanya and Israel Adesanya's brother. Like you can see the symbol, like you can tell they're related, but.
Dude,
I thought it was.
We literally have the skinny Tafa brother on this card.
Yeah, I thought it was 2 different. I thought it was just like him and his brother.
Yeah,
he's like that girl who gets like a profile picture for like social media, but like she gets like the perfect angle, but it was like 12 years ago, and she hasn't changed her profile picture. Like
Brzeski's next Sherdog Fight Finder photo will be taken from like the high MySpace
just
angle.
The cleavage.
But please God, he doesn't have any by then.
I made a 10-second joke about a girl. That girl who I don't think she listens to the show anymore. I'm sure she'll comment and say how terribly human I am.
You chased her away.
I did. I chased her away. That's terrible. All right. Back to this fight. So Waldo Cortes-Acosta, I'm shocked by him being a -300 favorite because so he's a high volume boxer. Like I like his output. He's pretty good. He's got a nice jab, throws straight power shots down the middle. He sets things up with feints. He gets in the pocket. He's a pretty clean boxer. He really whips his overhand right, but I like how he kind of wraps it around his opponent's defense. Going to the body is a huge thing. When you can see that's the boxer in him. Good power, but because of that boxing style, I mean, his legs are open. It's been 3 fights in a row where his legs just get kicked out like crazy. He keeps his chin high in the air, and he's a weak defensive wrestler. You already said the guy's name, so I'll say it too. Like Chase Sherman took him down, which is not a good thing. Very weak grappler. Looks like it's still early in his UFC career, so I don't want to like completely write off his grappling. We've seen guys who've really turned a corner in their grappling, but right now it just seems like a very one-dimensional fighter to me. Brzeski, he's a minus athlete, but he's a big guy, pressure striker. For like, even when we talk about him being like, looking kind of doughy, he's got pretty good high output. I mean, though that said, so that was like what with some of the things I said about him, like his contender series stuff. But his last fight against Carl Williams, he gets out early, and it was like the first round he was slowing down. I like his pretty fast hands, nice jab. I like his overhand right. He has to fight at a high pace. So if his cardio is not there, he's in trouble because he doesn't have power for heavyweight. That's one thing he lacks. He throws a lot of kicks, deep kicks, though he often sets him up with throw him naked. He keeps his chin high in the air, which makes it a big target. He also lacks head movement. He can get in the clinch and work for a takedown. Sometimes he'll catch a kick to get it to the ground. He looks to advance on the ground. He's got some pretty good ground and pound, but if he's on bottom, he struggles to get up. And again, his cardio used to be a strength. Now I wonder if it's a question mark. So it's kind of wait and see approach. Both guys have major holes. One, Costa being open to leg kicks, also not having a ground game. So Brzeski could easily kick out his legs. Like I'm going to bet her, but Cortes-Acosta should not be a 3-1 favorite against him. But he is the better boxer. So Like if I was like making a video game character out of them, like everything would be a 3, but Costa's boxing would be like a 5, and I go like, okay, I'll go with that. So I say he jabs up Brzeski. I have zero confidence in my pick, but give me Cortes by decision.
Next up at UFC Singapore, and at least as the card is currently constituted, the main card opener is a heavyweight matchup between Junior Tafa and Parker Porter. Tafa, the 26-year-old New Zealander, is 4-1 as a professional mixed martial artist. He is 0-1 in the UFC. He made his debut in April at UFC Fight Night, Pavlovich versus Blades, where he came out on the wrong end of a unanimous decision against Muhammad Usman. He'll look to get back into the win column after his first professional loss against Porter. The 38-year-old from Hartford, Connecticut, is 13-8 overall. He's 4-3 since joining the UFC just a little over 3 years ago. He is coming in off of a win. He knocked out Braxton Smith early in the first round at UFC 288 back in May. That got him back in the win column after back-to-back first-round losses to Jailton Almeida and Justin Tafa, the older brother of Junior. Odds here? Well, Keith, you tell me, who's the favorite, Junior Tafa or Parker Porter?
Not many guys. These guys would be favored over. I'll go with my boy Parker Porter.
Porter is actually your underdog. Tafa minus 140, Porter plus 115.
Okay, that's all right. I'm okay with that.
Here's the interesting thing to me. Tafa, just there isn't that much to see him as anything other than raw potential that's not ready for the UFC, even by the extremely lax standards of heavyweight. I remember, I mean, the first fight of his I saw, I was doing some duty for the Bellator versus Rising card last New Year's Eve, the one in, the one that took place in Saitama Super Arena. And he took on Tsuyoshi Sudario, the sumo convert that Ryzen is trying to build into something of a star. And despite the fact that he was pretty clearly being brought in to be a win for Sudario, I mean, Tafa just plunked him. Just used decent footwork to stay out of the way of a very lumbering sumo guy. Blistered him with punches from, a bewildering variety of angles and put him away in like 90 seconds. I mean, it was like a crappy heavyweight version of Anderson Silva versus Chris Lieben. Just, like Tafa went untouched. Everything he threw landed, and the thing was over in a minute. But nothing he's done indicates to me he's really ready for even middle of the road UFC level heavyweights. Muhammad Usman wasn't frightened or blown away by his power, took a couple of solid shots from him, was able to take him down. I mean, he made Muhammad Usman look like Kamaru Usman, if just for a fleeting moment. Parker Porter, I figured I had the book written on Parker Porter. Well, hell, I figured I had the book written on Parker Porter after his first UFC fight where he got, lumped up by Chris Daukaus in the first round. I want to say that was one of the earlier events that you and I did any sort of coverage for together, because it was my introduction to the dynamic of you never picking New England.
Parker Porter brought us together. The Parker Porter UFC writers has united us.
Well, I mean, a guy from Connecticut versus a cop was my perfect introduction to Keith's fight breakdowns. But you know what? Just the fact that he's still in the UFC right now, and Chris Daukaus is the one that's like dropping to light heavyweight to try to keep his job, it shows me that I underestimated him to a certain extent. But he is making a few little adjustments here and there. He came in for the Braxton Smith fight lighter than he's ever come in for a UFC fight. He was under 250.
Yeah, it's like 20, 25 pounds, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
it couldn't have been that much. What am I talking about?
But we are talking about a guy who weighed in at the heavyweight limit more than once. So for all we know, he had to do a water cut to get there, and he was
true.
So
true.
There's a possibility he's lost.
It could be like 30 pounds.
Yeah. And Parker Porter's never going to be light on his feet. But what he needs to be is Parker Porter version of light on his feet for at least 2 rounds on a consistent basis. If he can do that, this guy could hang around in the UFC for a long time. I mean, he's only 38.
The only thing he's gonna be light on is like light on the ketchup on his burger or something.
Maybe switch to like the light mayo, you know. But
there you go.
Porter, the things he's good at are still the same things he's always been good at. You know, decent leg kicks, throws good volume, not a ton of power for a guy as big as he is. This is going to sound insulting, and it isn't meant to be, but he seems almost like a training partner. Like if he's against someone, if he's going up against someone who does something very well, they're going to get a chance to show it against Parker Porter.
Oh, that's
like
great.
If you're Justin Tafa and you're a one punch like face plant knockout artist, you're going to get a chance to show that on Parker Porter. If you're Jailton Almeida and your whole thing is just being incredibly diesel and getting huge high amplitude takedowns and just molesting people on the ground once you've taken them down, you're going to get a chance to do that against Parker Porter. Even in the Daukaus fight, it's like Daukaus at the time was surprisingly well conditioned compared to how he looked, and a pretty diverse, aggressive striker on the feet. And sure enough, he chewed up Porter in a round. Like Junior Tafa, if this fight was right after the Daukaus fight, I'm like, oh, Junior Tafa is a guy with, you know, a lot of kickboxing experience, but he's still pretty raw in MMA. Doesn't matter because Porter's not going to be able to stop what Tafa wants to do. Tafa will knock him out in the first round. I'm not sure about that anymore. I'm going with yet another upset here just because I think Porter might be willing to try to take Tafa down. I think he might be willing to try to crowd Tafa. And Tsuyoshi Sudario looked completely helpless to try to corner Tafa. Just, you know, he went kind of lunging aimlessly and got busted up at angles as he like ran by like a bull to a matador. That won't happen with Porter. Like I think Porter has the presence of mind to cut off the cage, get into positions where Tafa can't use his reach advantage. Yeah, give me Parker Porter to win a decision here over Junior Tafa. And Tafa probably frustrated by night's end because he spent a lot of time getting ground on in the clinch, maybe taken down a few times, and has had precious few opportunities to just really tee off. So yeah, I'm calling for the new look Parker Porter to, you know, to get an upset win here.
Yeah. So Parker Porter, he's a weak athlete, slow, but he marches down his opponents. I'd say he's a serviceable boxer, attacks with combinations. He throws a lot of power shots. He loves his overhand right. He does have some pop, but he can be reckless. He fought Justin Tafa, right?
Yeah, he fought Justin Tafa.
Justin Tafa. Yeah, he fought Justin Tafa, and got smoked because he was just ducking his head and throwing, which is an issue. When he stays a little more calm, thudding leg kicks, he can be boring. You know, he'll close the distance and grind and clinch, but he's good there. He's got a big body, he's experienced. He has a lot of defensive flaws. He has this very like herky jerky movement where he just kind of seems uncomfortable. He also can walk into some shots. He makes a mistake of constantly trying to even the score when he gets tagged. If he gets hit with a big shot, he'll want to like even it up and land one of his own, which will kind of keep him from getting tagged a lot. He's been knocked out a few times. He will wrestle. He got takedowns against Chase Sherman, Alan Bordeaux, Braxton Smith. So Junior Tafa, sorry, I'm messing up Justin Jr. Junior Tafa, like you mentioned, he's only had a couple fights. There's not much film on him. Even like his UFC fight, it was mostly like getting hugged by Mo Usman, not be able to get up and bottom. He's a kickboxer, very slip and rip brawler. He hits hard, but he's a very weak defensive wrestler. I haven't seen anything of his offensive grappling, but he couldn't get off the bottom from Mo Usman. That said, I actually scored the fight for him because he landed shots and Mo Usman just did nothing but hold him down. So even though Mo Usman would like hold him down for like 4.5 minutes, like the 30 seconds of Juden Taffa let his hands go, I actually scored the fight for him. Yeah, I'm surprised that Juden Taffa is the favorite. I think this is an easy pick. I'm gonna say New England goes 2-0. I say Parker Porter's gonna close the distance. I think he's gonna close the distance. I think he's gonna get the fight to the ground. I think he's gonna bat him with ground and pound. I think he's gonna be a lot busier than Mo Usman was, and I think he might lock in the submission. I think Juden Taffa is gonna make a mistake, and I say Parker Porter's gonna sub him. So give me Parker Porter by second round submission.
All right. For those keeping track at home, that is 2 unanimous upset picks on this card so far. And one of them's from New England. Will wonders never cease? Next up on the UFC Fight Night 225 main card is a women's flyweight matchup between Erin Blanchfield and Taila Santos. Blanchfield, the 24-year-old New Jersey native, is 11-1 overall. She is 5-0 since joining the UFC about 3 years ago as a standout in Invicta Fighting Championships. She has wins over Sarah Alpar, Miranda Maverick, JJ Aldrich, Molly McCann, and most recently, Jessica Andrade. Blanchfield submitted the former strawweight champ, former multi-division terror in the second round after thoroughly out-grappling her and certifying herself no longer a prospect, but an actual contender. And as we alluded to off the top, the winner of this fight might be the closest to a title shot of anybody on this card. Not bad considering there are 4 more fights to go after this. But before she can worry about that, Blanchfield will have to get it done against a woman who has already had her peak at the top of the mountain and come up just short, Taila Santos. The 30-year-old Brazilian is 19-2 overall. She is 4-2 since joining the UFC out of the first season of Dana White's Contender Series Brazil. She debuted with a mystifying split decision loss to Mara Romero Barella back in 2019 that will go down as one of the bigger kind of aberration fights in UFC history. Then rattled off 4 straight wins over Molly McCann, Jillian Robertson, Roxanne Modafferi, and Joanne Wood in order to earn a title shot at possibly the most dominant fighter in the sport at the time, Valentina Shevchenko. And Santos gave her everything she could handle for 5 rounds. Nonetheless, she came up on the wrong end of that split decision. That was a little over a year ago, and she is looking to certify herself still very much a threat to win the title, whether against new champ Alexa Grasso or against Shevchenko. Odds here? Keith, tell me who's the favorite.
I'm assuming this is a really close line.
Well, here, the favorite is -150. The underdog is +120.
I'll say because she's been more active recently, Blanchfield is the favorite, but I think that line is too wide. I think this should be a pick and fight.
You are correct. And in my opinion, you're correct on both counts. But yes, Erin Blanchfield -150, Taila Santos +120. Taila Santos is, I mean, I have had to change my mind on Taila Santos so many times. Like, I'm surprised I'm not wearing a neck brace right now. When she came to the UFC out of she had this incredible, she was like 16, or, I think she was like 13-0 or 14-0. A lot of it in Aspera FC that I've said before, it exists both as a regional promotion and as basically a vehicle for getting Astra Fight Team fighters easy wins on their way up. Like, it's kind of a win factory for Astra Fight Team. So when Taila Santos came to the UFC at like 12-0 or 13-0 with a bunch of wins in Aspera FC and then a win over a badly overmatched opponent on Dana White's Contender Series Brazil, and then she lost to Mara Romero Barella in her UFC debut, I completely wrote her off. I was like, this is another inflated Brazilian, and I may have meant that both her record and her physique were inflated. And then she started winning fights, and she won 4 in a row, and she got a title shot. But even there, I know that the UFC was desperate for challengers for Valentina Shevchenko by the time they fought last summer. I mean, Shevchenko was getting to that Israel Adesanya point where she was going to have to start rematching people. She had cleaned up the division so thoroughly, but man, Molly McCann, Jillian Robertson, Roxanne Modafferi, and Joanne Wood, that's not a sparkling resume to build a title challenger off of. So I was shocked when Santos really kind of put it on Shevchenko and won several rounds off her. So again, I've had to change my mind back and forth on Santos a few times. One thing that I'm sure of about her is that she's one of the strongest, most athletic, most explosive women in the division, Shevchenko included. Like, she's maybe the first fighter to take on Shevchenko that could match her in that regard. And that's what makes me interested in seeing how Blanchfield does against her, because Blanchfield, obviously, she's at least good everywhere now, but where she hangs her hat is she's an elite grappler, and it's an elite grappling that has transferred over very well to MMA, but she's not huge for 125 pounds. Like, she's decent sized. She's pretty athletic. She has grappler strength. Like, you can tell when she gets her hands on other women that most of the time she's able to push them around. I mean, the way she threw around Jessica Andrade was something to behold. But if she can do that to Tyler Santos, she is absolutely the real thing. If she can't, like, if she has trouble getting Santos down, we're going to learn things about Erin Blanchfield that, we've been asking since the beginning. Because Santos has better reach. I think she's a more diverse striker. I think she's definitely a harder hitter. She has a meanness in clinch situations that I could spell bad news for Blanchfield. If Blanchfield is pursuing the clinch primarily as a way to try to get the fight to the ground, I think Santos is someone who understands the principle that the other half of takedown defense is making your opponent pay for trying. And anytime you see a fight where so-and-so, was 0 for 12 on their takedown attempts or 1 for 15, my question is always, why did they get to try 15 times?
Yeah.
Everything I've seen about Erin Blanchfield tells me that she's a future champ in this division. Not just a future title challenger, but at age 24, improving the way she is, I think she's a future champ. But I think the Santos fight here might be a little too much too soon for the 24-year-old. Give me Erin Blanchfield to come out on the wrong end of a kind of a 3-round beating, where at the end she is something like 1 for however many on her takedown attempts. The one time she took Santos down, Santos was able to get back up without getting her back taken or spending like 2.5 minutes, fighting off topside takedown attempts. And where Blanchfield is a bit marked up because Santos has been jabbing her in the face, has been, lighting her up with punches, probably kneeing her to the body and legs in clinch situations. Yeah, give me Santos to get a decision here over a frustrated, kind of beat up Erin Blanchfield, who will have some things to take back to the drawing board, but we won't be done talking about her as a top level contender, not by a long shot.
This is a really, really good fight. I want to correct one thing you said. You said that the majority had it for Santos over Shevchenko. I just looked. It was actually on MMA decisions. It was 53-47 for Shevchenko with the fan voting, but the media had it 19-8 for Shevchenko. But I want to say both you and I both scored it for Santos.
I didn't say majority. I said a vocal minority.
I'm sorry.
And I kind of said vocal minority because you and I were in that minority.
Oh,
and we're both like, I knew that like a majority had scored it for Shevchenko, and I didn't think it was a robbery.
Yeah, but the majority don't know how to score, so that's obviously established. I don't remember the round. I mean, I don't remember what rounds, but I remember it was extremely close. But to even be extremely close with Valentina Shevchenko at that time, with a lot of people believing that she won, says a lot. This is a great fight, I've always been a fan of Erin Blanchfield. I say this every time. I'll say it again. She should be undefeated. Yep. I would go to my grave saying it. She beat Tracy Cortez. She seems to be improving as an athlete, which is rare. Like, she looked faster in her fight against Jessica Andrade than she's done so far in her career. Her hands speed was always one of the things I was like, oh, that's the things that she's lacking in overall athleticism. But her hands look fast. She pressured with volume. She's a pressure counter striker, slip and rip style. I've said this before about her. She is fearless. She walks down her foes. I mean, she was walking right in on Jessica Andrade, which not the brightest strategy, but obviously it worked out for her. And the scary thing is, being that she's so young, she hasn't even come into her power yet. She was cracking Andrade. She's got, and Andrade has big power. If she continues to add some power, I mean, she's dangerous. I like that she's throws a lot of leg kicks, though she doesn't check leg kicks. But she had that incredible high kick knockout against Victoria Leonardo in Victor. But when we talk about Erin Blanchard, we talk about what you mentioned. She's an absolute wizard on the ground. Good entries. She likes to shoot a single and then like run the pipe. Her wrestling looks really good against Miranda Maverick. But in fairness, that Miranda Maverick win hasn't aged that well. But when she gets to the ground, I mean, she's definitely like more of a grappler than a wrestler. But when she gets to the ground, she's a lead of the ground. I mean, incredible top pressure. Some of the meanest ground and pound I've seen. I've said this about her before. When she comes off all sweet and very, what am I saying? Soft spoken and stuff in her interviews. But when she gets in the cage, and she's got a mean streak in her. I mean, they go back to the Molly McCann fight when she got her that nasty crucifix was dropping bombs on her face. I mean, it was tough to watch if you're a Molly McCann fan. She's a BJJ black belt. She's an EBI world champion. I mean, she's slick. She's got some serious submission skills. Again, she hit McMahon with that amazing Kimura. She choked out Jessica Andrade. I shouldn't say choked out. She wasn't unconscious. But you know what I mean? Like, she got Jessica Andrade in a rear naked choke in her last fight. So Santos is tough, though. I mean, Santos is one thing I'll say about Santos, regardless of how you scored the fight with her versus Valentina Shevchenko, the moment wasn't too big for her. We've seen challengers, especially against, like, oh man, the champion you're going against seems invincible. Especially Shevchenko looked at that time. The moment wasn't too big for her. Like, the pressure didn't get to her. She wasn't intimidated by Valentina Shevchenko. And that's very impressive to me. Now, she's a high volume striker. She's a Muay Thai striker. She fights with a lot of pressure. She's a builder, too. As the fight goes on, she gets stronger. Nice pop-in shots. I love her step-in knees. She gets some hard kicks. I love her front kick that she uses just to kind of back her opponent up. Now, she makes mistakes of moving back in the center line when she's being pressured. She also keeps her chin a little too high in the air for my liking. But if she can get to the clinch, she's a strong clinch grappler. Good knees inside, good body lock takedowns. She also dropped down in the hips from the clinch, like something she was doing against Valentina Shevchenko a lot. Close the distance, just drop it down her hips. Can shoot from distance. I mean, we've seen how good her takedowns were against Valentina Shevchenko. On top, she advances position. She's out wrestled good grappler. I shouldn't say good, but people know for the grappler. Like Julian Robertson, Roxanne Modafferi, Valentina Shevchenko. I mean, I know that wasn't. I shouldn't say out wrestled Valentina. There was a lot of back and forth in that. But you get my point. The very fact that up until that point, we didn't see anybody really have any success against Valentina Shevchenko in the grappling. She's got some good back takes. She obviously quickly choked out Joanne Wood in her last fight. This is an amazing fight, and honestly, I hate that the UFC is burying this fight on this card. I don't like that it's on the main card and everything, but it's the time of this main card. Like, to me, this could have been on the pay-per-view in Boston last week. I think this fight could have been a main event for a card.
I think it should have been a main event for a card, especially considering that if Blanchfield wins really impressively, she's one phone call away from being a title challenger in her next fight.
Yeah.
And she hasn't fought,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like Santos too.
But Santos has been in 5-round fights before.
Oh yeah. Oh
yeah.
No, I guess. Yeah. Sorry, I messed up. I just meant I thought you meant just from the just big step up. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Santos, if Shevchenko gets the title back and Santos wins, I mean, that's marketing. But this is the most important fight on the card, including the main event. I think about 2 weeks ago when in the Apex, Vicente Luque and RDA fight each other. This fight should have been over that fight. this should have been the main event of that card.
Yeah.
Whatever. I mean, but to be below Nakamura and Fernie Garcia, to be below Alex Caceres and Giga Chikara, like the co-main event, Smith versus Spawn, like this should be over that fight. Like I just don't get it. Like I don't know. Anyways, moving back to this could be the number one contender matchup. I mean, a lot of people believe that Santos could be the champion right now. What I'll say about them, though, is if you go over their most recent wins, a lot of people believe in that Jessica Andrade is washed. I don't believe Jessica Andrade is washed. I think she's gone against 3 buzzsaws in a row. I think she's seen signs of decline. So you kind of like pump the brakes a little bit on the Erin Blanchfield win. But then for Talia Santos, you got to ask the question, is Shevchenko declining? Because, we expected her to blow the doors off against Santos. She wins. I think it was a split decision, wasn't it?
Yep.
A split decision that me and you both thought went the wrong way. And 47% of the, fans thought it went the wrong way. Then she loses to Alexa Grasso, someone that she was supposed to smoke. So I'm not by any means saying that Valentinenko is faded, washed, or anything like that. So I'm being very, very clear. I'm just saying you can ask the question. That's all I'm saying. And if she obviously loses to Grasso, you got to ask that even more. Man, I'm torn, man. I'm really torn in this fight because I'm such a Blanchfield person. Like I've been a believer of Blanchfield when she was in Victor. Like she's one that I've been super, super high on. But I see a lot of things you're saying about Santos. Like this is a tough fight for both. I think for both of them. I'm high on both of them. I'm going to go Blanchfield. The reason why I want to go Blanchfield is, to me, Santos' best. She really has 2 avenues. The one is just being too big. She might be just too big for Blanchfield. She's older. She's physically bigger. She can just out muscle Blanchfield and kind of big sister, and especially because at the age Blanchfield is, she hasn't really got that muscle yet. No. So that very well could be a possibility. But the other possibility is just kind of keeping it like a longer, rangier kickboxing fight from the outside, and Blanchfield has struggle. But I could see her also go for takedowns. And she might get up. She might get on top and get takedowns. But if she shoots on Blanchfield and she ends up on bottom, Blanchfield is not the person you want to go in a straight grappling where Blanchfield's on top. Blanchfield has great control, great back takes, great ground and pound. I think she's going to be tempted. I think we're going to get that. I think we'd have a war. I think we'd have some fun exchange on the feet, some clinch battling, some ground. But I'm leaning Blanchfield. I say Blanchfield wins. I'd say she wins a very close decision.
The UFC Singapore main card powers on with a bantamweight matchup between Rinya Nakamura and Fernando Garcia. Nakamura, the 28-year-old from Saitama, is a perfect 7-0 as a professional mixed martial artist. He is 3-0 in various UFC octagons. He won both of his fights on the road to UFC and then knocked out Toshiomi Kazama, whom we talked about just a little while ago, in just 33 seconds at the Lewis versus Spivak Fight Night back in February. He will look to keep his spotless professional record that way against Garcia, who is out there still looking for his first UFC win. The 31-year-old Texan is 10-3 overall. He is 0-2 since joining the UFC out of the 5th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He knocked out Josh Weems on the Contender Series back in October of 2021. Since then, he has come out on the wrong side of unanimous decisions against Journey Newson and Brady Heastand. The most recent of those, the Heastand fight, was last November at UFC Fight Night, Njokuani versus Kudalaba. As we've already alluded to, and anybody who is paying attention could probably have figured out, Nakamura is a prohibitive favorite here. So I'll ask Keith a fun question. Who's a bigger favorite, Rinya Nakamura or Max Holloway?
Nakamura.
It's close, and I mean, you can find a line where it is that way, but if you were to take kind of, again, the median of the respectable sites, Nakamura is 800, Garcia plus 500, and I understand why. Rinya Nakamura, we don't talk about it as easily or as quickly just because, he didn't come up through the American college system or the Olympics, which are kind of the big flags for amateur wrestling. But Nakamura is up there with the most accomplished amateur wrestlers to cross over into MMA in their athletic prime. I mean, we're talking about a guy that was a U23 world champ. And then,
do you know who else was a U23 world champ? Bo Nickel.
Hey, we made it. We worked it in. And Nakamura, I mean, he's at least comparable to people like Nickel or Jordan Oliver in terms of the kind of credentials he brought across. And again, it's a blessing to us that after winning the U23 gold medal, instead of sticking around and maybe trying to win regular worlds or go on to the Olympics, he switched over to MMA at age 24. A lot of other guys kind of in his same boat go the Jordan Oliver route, and we don't really see him until they're past 30, and that's just not quite as exciting. And Nakamura is specifically the kind of amateur wrestler that translates over well to MMA. I always go back to the preview that Keith and I did for the NCAA Wrestling Championships earlier this year. We'll do that again in 2024, believe it. But,
real quick.
Yeah.
See what happened to Sammy Sasso?
No, what happened?
Dude, he got shot. He's fighting for his life. For those who don't follow it, he's a multi-time All-American. He's been a runner-up twice. He was in the finals this year. Mm-hmm. He actually went against who did he lose? Oh, Yanni DeMarco, who winning his fourth title was against Sammy Sasso. Sasso gave him a good match.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know I speak for both of us. Press to him. It was a robbery. There was a witness who said there was a young kid someone robbed him and shot him. Jeez. And I mean, this is a young kid. He's college. He's an incredible future. So yeah, pray everything goes well.
Yeah, very much so. Wow. On that preview, I drew you out a little bit about, if we're MMA guys covering wrestling, what are the things we look for that make somebody a likely, good crossover candidate should they decide to try? And the things we came up with were, obviously plus athleticism. If you have unteachable athleticism, like you can do well in MMA if you are a Ben Askren athlete, but it's sure a bonus if you're a Michael Chandler athlete. And then you pointed out an aggressive style. Like if your style is based off of waiting for your opponent to do something, stopping them and winning your matches 3 go-getter, and you're putting tech falls on people, and then having a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, like being the kind of wrestler that always looks like he probably wants to punch his opponent, always helpful as well. Nakamura, check. He is an explosive athlete. He's an aggressive wrestler. He's physically strong as an ox. I mean, you look at him, he is of that kind of Michael Chandler build, Josh Koscheck build, where he's short, stocky, muscles on his muscles. And he has picked up the skills that you want a wrestler to pick up in their first half dozen MMA fights. He's good at taking the back. That's not a natural skill for wrestlers. You don't find yourself in that position very often. He got good ground and pound. It took Ben Askren a long time. It took him probably 12 or 15 fights before he realized, I am such a better grappler than these guys that I can just take this free hand and start beating the shit out of them. Like it took a while before, like
he's the only guy I seen stood up in full bout for inactivity. It happened. I try to remember which fight it was. I wonder if it was a Douglas Lima fight. I can't remember what it was, but yeah, he was in full mount and got stood up.
And yeah, so good ground and pound, decent movement on the feet. I mean, his striking fundamentals are going to be a work in progress for a while. Ahead of his fight with Kazama, I called him maybe a more athletic Masakatsu Ueda. Just talking about, a very good technical Japanese wrestler in that weight class. And Nakamura just has more physical diesel to make it go. I still feel that way. And he's going against somebody in Fernie Garcia who specifically his weaknesses are his wrestling and his athleticism. Like he's a scrappy guy. He's well coached. You and I are both big Fortis MMA backers. I like the kind of fighters they turn out, but Fernie, it's still very much on him to prove he even belongs in the UFC bantamweight division. And it's hard to picture a worse matchup for him outside of the top 10 than Rinya Nakamura. Like, of course, Aljamain Sterling or Merab Dvalishvili would be a terrible matchup for him. But when you're talking about a guy that's also like outside the top 15, Nakamura is about as bad as it gets. I expect Nakamura will, unless he decides to show off whatever wrinkles he's been learning in striking, kind of like Bo Nickel clearly has been doing, I expect that he'll take down Garcia pretty easily with a blast double within the first 30 seconds. And I don't think it makes it out of the first round. Unless Nakamura really gets stunned by something or makes a terrible, terrible decision, I think we're looking at a ground and pound TKO or a kind of choose your poison, submission type thing within the first 3 minutes or so.
Yeah, when it comes to comparison to him to somebody, this might be a little lazy being, Japan, but the person I thought of was Kid Yamamoto. Like super athletic, super fast, extremely powerful. So that's the guy I thought of, newer Kid Yamamoto or modern day Kid Yamamoto. He's super athletic. I mean, you see how he fights too. Like he's throwing flying knees and stuff. He's trying to entertain. He's a southpaw who's very fast hands, incredible power. I mean, he's a brand new. Like he just came over to MMA. He steps into his shots. Now he is open to leg kicks. I don't like how he reacts when getting hit. He kind of overreacts, and then he kind of tries to start throwing wildly. So that he could get his chin checked by somebody. Little Aaron early Aaron Pico would do stuff like that too. Who also was extremely. I think Aaron Pico was a U23 world champ too. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was too. He's a good dirty boxer. My concern with his wrestling is how he fall in love with his hands. Get that like Dan Henderson, Josh Koscheck, but one time Bubba Jenkins, Mo Lawal. Like a lot of elite wrestlers can do that. And I'm worried that he'll do that. But I mean, you mentioned that his wrestling is off the charts. Credible hip control, credible entries, great at winning scrambles, smothering top control. He doesn't have a submission yet, but when you have that kind of grappling background, the submissions will come. They're going to come. Fernie Garcia, he's not a great athlete. He's a little flat-footed, but he makes up with his pressure boxing, which is really surprised when he went against Journey Newsom that he wasn't letting his hands go, because that's kind of his thing, is winning with volume. He kind of got the same routine though. Like, I've seen a lot of fights he throws like the same jab, right hook combos. He kind of gets a little predictable. He kind of winks his punches. I do like his chef left hook. It's pretty good. He did show that he had some power against Brady Hairston. He hurt him a couple times with his power, but doesn't check leg kicks. Was really open to that. He had his legs kicked out on the Contender Series. He isn't a wrestler, and he's not an offensive wrestler, but which is fine. But my concern, he's a weak defensive wrestler. But he is a submission threat. He's got 3 submissions in his career. I'm with you, man. Like, what'd you say? He was -800 favorite. Like, I'm not going to be trying to be like, I've picked some big upsets before. Some I look pretty good. Some I look pretty dumb. I'm not going to be that guy in this one. Like, I'm all over Nakamura in this one. He could take an easy route and just wrestle and Garcia's going to have no answer for his wrestling, but I don't think he will. He seems like a guy who really wants to entertain the crowd, wants to become a star with the way he fights. And I think he lands a huge shot. I think he puts it out early. I say Nakamura continues this incredible run showing off his power, and I say he wins by first round knockout.
Third from the top at UFC Fight Night 225 is a featherweight matchup between Giga Chikadze and Alex Caceres. Chikadze, the 34-year-old Georgian by way of Southern California, is 14-3 overall. He is 7-1 in the UFC. He joined the UFC a little under 4 years ago and won 7 in a row, making his way into the featherweight top 10 and marking himself as one of the more promising and exciting rising contenders in that division before running into Calvin Kattar last January in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 32. Chikadze came out very much on the wrong end of a unanimous decision there and has been out ever since. So more than 18 months on the shelf for the former kickboxing champ, and he's going to look to get back on track, remind us who he was and why he was so exciting at the expense of Bruce Leroy. Caceres, 35-year-old Floridian by way of Arizona, is 21-13 with 1 no contest overall. He is 16-11 since joining the UFC out of the 12th season of The Ultimate Fighter. He is coming into this fight on the back of back-to-back wins over Julian Erosa and Daniel Pineda. The most recent of those, the Pineda fight, was back in June at UFC on ESPN, Cara France versus Albazi, where he picked up a unanimous decision. So Caceres looking to make it 3 wins in a row, turn back a, still pretty hype-worthy rising contender and continue his kind of fun, feel-good mid-career turnaround story. He is not favored to do so, however. Chikadze, lost to Kattar, long shelf time and all, is still minus 240 or so on most of your cards, on most of your books. Caceres around plus 190. Keith, I mean, unless you thought Giga Chikadze was a future UFC champ and he was just going to win his, all of his fights until he won the title, you knew that a loss was coming sooner or later. Did the person he lost to in Calvin Kattar and the way he lost change how you think about him at all? And how do you see it going against Caceres here?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, a little bit, because I didn't expect Calvin Kattar to out kickbox him. I mean, I thought that was a perfect stylist. No, Kattar, in fairness, Kattar's started landing shots after he wrestled early. So that might have opened up his shots. I also think he got hurt and he didn't recover. He also got tired. So the little bit combination of both. But it was a fantastic game plan by Calvin Kattar and his team. And not only just having the right game plan, being able to execute the perfect game plan. That was a really good performance by Calvin Kattar. This is tough because, I mean, Alex Caceres is a tricky person, while I'm high on Chikadze, I mean, he's his kickboxing, he moves really well. He's definitely like a sniper with a striking. I like that I know it seemed like I keep comparing to last night's card in Boston. That's obviously on my brain, but he does transition into stances very well, similar to how Sean O'Malley does. He's fighting southpaw and orthodox. He throws a lot of feints. He feints with his feet, feints with his shoulders, hip, faking the kicks. Very calm and poised in the striking. He sees everything, and he can strike out of both stances really well. Quick hands, serious power in both hands. From the orthodox stance, his overhand right is deadly. I like that. He really is intelligent. He'll throw punches at different angles, so it's not always just straight to the middle. He'll dip and it's coming on this angle. Next time he throws an uppercut from this angle. He also adjusts his speed. That's the thing that really impresses me, is he'll snap out a jab, and then the next time he'll throw a jab, he might throw a little bit slower, or he'll throw a little slower now, and then the next time he throws it faster. And then he'll do that with his counters and stuff, so you kind of have trouble picking up his speed and his timing. He's one of these guys too. Like he'll throw straight shots and then just whip stepping around it. Like who's called like coming around the mountain, like he's trying to sneak out the back, or good body kicks. He's a weak defensive wrestler. I mean, his offense. We keep hearing about him improving. We haven't really seen anything. It's a major Achilles heel is his defensive wrestling, and also he's gassed out in past. So. Alex Caceres is a tricky veteran. I mean, he's well-rounded. He's southpaw. He's athletic. He moves well. Chris jab. I like the Daniel Pineda fight where he was beating Daniel Pineda's body. I like his follow shots. He's constantly throwing from like weird angles. So it's kind of hard to pick up, his movement, the way he throws. He's been showing some power too. I mean, he blasted Julian Erosa. He hurt Daniel Pineda. He's got a good, kicking game has always been the biggest thing in his striking is his kicks. Good kicks from the outside. I'd say he's an underrated grappler, and that's because he's underrated offensive wrestler because his defensive wrestling is so bad that we think of him sometimes as this guy, if you take him down, he struggles, but he's got very funky style grappling. Now he's one of these guys, he'll take chances, he'll put himself in bad position, but he showed against Danny Pineda, who's a very good grappler himself, how hard it is to submit him because, Pineda was putting out all the stops with the submissions. Like Caceres was super tough and getting out of these submission attempts. If Caceres can turn this into a grappling matchup, he wins. I'm not a better, but at those odds, like he was like almost 3-1 favorite.
It's minus 240.
And what was the comeback on Caceres, you said?
Plus 190. And I mean, there's some places
that gets up higher.
And there's some places where it's higher even now. Like, again, I kind of went middle of the road, but there are places where Caceres is more than plus 200.
Yeah, you get it. If it goes up and you get him at like plus 250. I always like to say this when it comes to gambling. You got to be willing, when you take an underdog and it's a big size, you got to be willing to lose that money, But to me, the line should be closer. Now, I'm not going to go that way. I am going to go with Giga Chikadze. He's going to have to move. He's going to have to, all the weird things that Alex does, especially, as much as he comes off like a wild man, he's intelligent. Like, he's going to put himself in the best position to win, which is, I really believe he's going to try to grapple. But I see Chikadze kicking his legs. For some reason, the way Caceres moves and his big long legs, I can see Chikadze trying to stop him from moving, calf kicking him. I think eventually the calf kick's going to add up, and Caceres is going to stop. His body's going to start failing him, and then I think one day I keep envisioning Giga kicking his legs, Alex like hobbling around and either like fake a kick and then going high, like with a punch or a high kick or something. And that's going to be the bomb that kind of finishes Caceres, hurts him. I don't think he'll put him out cold, but like hurts him and then follows up with some shots. Give me Giga Chikadze by second round TKO.
Yeah, this is a hard fight for me to call. And I think primarily it's because so much about Chikadze is unknown. Like, I mean, if this fight were taking place, last January instead of the Cater fight, Chikadze would have been like a minus 900 favorite, like just after plowing through like Cub Swanson and Edson Barboza, with ease. But he looked human in a loss to Cater. And the way he lost to Cater, it's not a blueprint that Alex Caceres could follow to the letter, but Caceres and his team, I mean, he's at the MMA lab. It's something that, John Crouch could watch that tape and there are takeaways they definitely use. And then the fact that Chikadze has been out for over 18 months. Like, he was supposed to fight earlier this year, withdrew with an injury. He'd already been off for a year by then. Chikadze, I mean, he's a 34-year-old with a good amount of kickboxing behind him. And this is just gut feeling, but even before the long injury layoff, he's a guy that sort of felt brittle to me, like where he looks like he has a difficult weight cut. He looks good in like the third round of fights where he is controlling the pace. Like, if it's the third round of a fight where he's just been whipping the dude's ass, he's fine. But in the Cater fight, that was not the case. when the pace was dictated to him. His gas tank didn't look great. Like, he looked human and flawed in a lot of ways. And just the question to me is he still the guy that lost to Cater? Is he better than that guy? Is he worse than that guy because of just the passage of time, the injury? And if he is worse, is it in ways that Caceres could take advantage of? Because as a strict stylistic matchup, I agree. It should be Chikadze eluding Caceres pretty easily, kicking the crap out of his legs, and then going upstairs with a head kick like he used on Jamie Simmons, or that horrific body kick he used to put down Cub Swanson, and this thing is a wrap. I'm not a betting guy. Neither of us are. We're always at pains to make that clear. But even if I were, I'd stay way the hell away from this one. Like the definition of a dog or pass fight. And the thing is, if you take Caceres and Chikadze is the same guy he was last January, you're going to watch your money evaporate real fast because it's a bad style matchup for Caceres. Give me Chikadze in this one as well. I'll say Caceres makes it to a decision, but he's going to look like he's been hit by a car and maybe the car backed over his legs again, before peeling out. Chikadze by decision. That brings us to the co-main event of UFC Singapore, a light heavyweight rematch between Anthony Smith and Ryan Spann. Smith, the 35-year-old Nebraskan, is 36-18 overall. He is 11-8 in the UFC. He is 7-5 at light heavyweight. He is coming into this fight on a 2-fight losing streak. He fought last July, got knocked out in the second round by Magomed Ankalaev, came back this May at UFC on ABC Rosenstrike versus Almeida, and dropped a unanimous decision to Johnny Walker. Prior to that, he'd been on a 3-fight winning streak, which happened to culminate about 2 years ago with a first-round submission of Spann. So Smith looking to go 2-0 against his foe. Spann looking to get this one back. Spann, 31-year-old Texan, is 21-8 overall. He is 7-3 since joining the UFC as a 2-time veteran of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought on the first season of the Contender Series and lost to Carl Roberson, and then came back for season 2. Choked out Emiliano Sordi in like 30 seconds. And ever since then, he's been in the UFC, again, 7-3. He lost his last time out, got triangled in the first round by Nikita Krylov. Prior to that, he had back-to-back first-round finishes of Iwan Kudalaba and Dominic Reyes. As I mentioned, these two fought in September of 2021. And it was the headliner of UFC Fight Night 192. Smith got a fairly straightforward first round club and sub that the only real interest lent to it was that they were kind of jawing at each other after the fight. And apparently some bad blood persisted because we now are treated to a rematch that I didn't feel like many people were asking for, except maybe for Smith and Spann themselves. Despite the result of their first meeting, Spann is actually the favorite in the rematch. He is minus 130 or so. Smith is available at plus money, plus 105, plus 110 at a couple of your more reputable outlets. Keith, we have very relevant game tape on these guys because, again, they fought. There was nothing particularly fluky about the fight. It wasn't 8 years ago. And while both guys have fought since then, neither of them seems to be a night and day different fighter. So if the bettors and the bookies that make the lines around them think Spann's going to do differently this time, I'd love for you to explain to me why.
I'm going to disagree about Anthony Smith. I think he's different.
Okay, you think he's shown some?
I think he's looked terrible lately.
Okay.
You know? So he's always been this like overachiever. He was never this guy. Like, I remember when he first got brought into the UFC, I was like, Anthony Smith, like he's like the king of the regionals. Like that's, and if you told me that he would rise over to a UFC title back then, I would have laughed at you. I'm glad that he did, because he seems like he's like a great dude and everything. But I mean, his lack of athleticism, the amount of injuries he's had, and then the amount of battles he's been through, I think it's time to, catch up to him. Now he's always need to be, a technical guy, kind of guy that beats you with volume, with crisp boxing, throws combinations, has a lot of variety in his attacks, not just a boxer. I like that kicks are a big part of his combinations, but he's always lacked power for the division. I mean, you're talking about a former middleweight. How he made a middleweight is
he's a former welterweight. The guy's 1-1 against Josh Neer.
Oh, there you go. Sorry, former welterweight. Sorry.
Yeah,
he spent a lot of time at middleweight.
Yeah.
How he did and how he ever made welterweight is I mean, he's not a small light heavyweight. That's the thing about him. But he's never been like a power punch. I mean, he obviously has power, but you know what I'm saying? He's never been like he's not Anthony
Johnson.
Rumble Johnson, not knocking guys out like that. Another guy at one point was a welterweight. Yeah. Wow. Or at least he tried. At least he was supposed to weigh it at welterweight. How many times he actually made it? That's differently. But I love his teep kicks. But he hasn't been responding. I mean, go back to like Rakic. Rakic was destroying him with calf kicks. Teixeira gave him an epic beatdown. He's slowed down. Like he looked lost out there against Johnny Walker, which is. Walker looked good, but like he had no answer for him. I know he's had a lot of injuries, but yeah, Ryan Spann, he's a big light heavyweight. He's long and lengthy, but he's always been kind of like a low output striker, and that's because he throws a lot of power shots, and he's definitely a power striker. He whips his left hand. When he tightens things up, he's actually pretty good technically. Like he dropped Dominic Reyes with a jab. He's kind of been good at beating guys to the point of contact. Now, I just mentioned his striking though, but I think he has this little Alistair Overeem thing going on where everyone thinks of him as a striker, but he actually might be better on the ground. He's got a fantastic guillotine. I mean, he subbed Iwan Kujalaba with it. He almost subbed Sam Malvey with a standing triangle choke. Though when they fought, it was, Smith subbed him. But it was like you said, Smith caught him and then jumped on something. He also got subbed in his fight against Nikita Krylov. But he's got 11 submission wins, and with the guillotine being his go-to. Yeah, I understand all the reasons why you say. Like, I am very surprised that they're running this one back, especially like 2 years later. It wasn't, like you mentioned, wasn't that long ago. I don't trust Smith's body anymore. And yeah, I could look really stupid if Smith just smashes Spann again. And Spann always seems to have this inability to get over the hump. Like he makes to a certain level, and then he goes against the guys like Anthony Smith, and he gets kind of pushed back down a tier every time. But I'm going to say that's not the case this time. I'm going to say it's going to be the completely opposite. I think it's going to be a club and stuff for him. I think he's going to hurt Smith, and then I think he's going to jump on, and I'm going to say he jumps on a guillotine. I say he does in the very first round. Give me Spann by first round submission.
Yeah. I mean, I guess when I said that Smith seems to be, roughly the same fighter that he was 2 years ago, I wasn't necessarily meaning it in the sense that he looks great now, but in that I thought he was pretty shot even by the time he and Spann fought for the first time. Like his
That's fair.
His durability was already a question mark. I would say that I will agree that something that was disturbing and that is new since the first time they fought is how inert he looked against Walker. Because up until that fight, I would have put Anthony Smith firmly in the too tough for his own good category. Like a guy that would just take some epic beatdowns and I mean was still trying to win. Like the Teixeira fight, one of the worst beatings we've ever seen, even in the fourth and fifth round when it should have been stopped. The dude's teeth are falling out between rounds. He's still coming out and he's still winning the first 30 seconds.
I forgot about the teeth. I forgot about that. Yeah.
And now, dude, that was after the third round. Like he went out for another 6 minutes.
Yeah. Dude, he's like sometimes these MMA fighters, they're not human.
They aren't. And And I mean, Smith, even teeth falling out, he still came out and won the first 30 seconds of the 4th round against Teixeira. And then Teixeira hit him once, took him down, and it was off to the races again. So it was a new wrinkle to see that against Walker, once he got hit a few times, once he realized the problems that Walker presented just in terms of range. I mean, it's not often that Anthony Smith has given up reach. He just turned inert. Like, he just didn't, like, an Anthony Smith that doesn't pull the trigger is a little disturbing. So yeah, you're definitely right on that point. Here in their first fight, I guess I saw it as, if they fought 10 times, it probably would have ended in a first round finish for one or the other of them 9 out of 10 times. And it would have just been whether Spann connected cleanly and Smith's just kind of chin and durability gave out, or Spann made, a mistake, had one of his lapses of attention, defensive blunders, and got blitzed. I still feel that way now, but now that I think about it, I think you are right. Like, Smith is maybe bringing a knife to a gunfight at this point. Spann still has flaws. I mean, you look, he has 3 losses in the UFC. The Johnny Walker one is very controversial because, he got elbowed and punched in the back of the head like literally 15 times in a row. But then the Smith and Krylov ones, I mean, Smith caught him on the feet, finished him fast. Krylov, Spann, like, basically, he made the kind of blunder that it's usually Krylov making that blunder. He could still do that against Smith, but I don't know if Smith will be able to take advantage of it lightning fast like he has in the past. I agree with you that Smith, I mean, he's never been a big one-hit knockout artist, not even when he was a huge welterweight or a huge middleweight. But he is a guy who has nastiness in all 8 points. Like, his knees and elbows are like, definitely plus power strikes for him. But if he gets in a situation where, like, those are his best weapons against Spann, I think he's in trouble. Because Spann is just a mauler at that kind of clinch range. He is so tall and his arms are so long that, I mean, there's a reason that he has 12 submissions and I think 10 of them are guillotines. Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm favoring Spann in this one. And if I'm favoring Spann, there's no reason to guess that it's going to go past the first round. So give me Spann by first round. I'll say he gets a TKO here. But did you say sub?
Yeah, first round.
Yeah, if it's a first round sub, I wouldn't be that surprised either. It'll be an either or thing, but Spann will be the one to land something big first, and then it'll start to roll downhill fast. With that, we come to the main event of UFC Fight Night 225, a featherweight matchup between Max Holloway and Seung Jung. Holloway, the 31-year-old Hawaiian, is 24-7 overall. He is 20-7 since joining the UFC as a very green, skinny teenager with his hair sticking up a million years ago. That 20-7 run obviously has seen him climb to the highest heights. He is a former featherweight champ. He is still very much in the discussion for the greatest featherweight in MMA history. He at least fought for an interim lightweight title, even if it didn't go his way. And at 31, and after all those wars, he's still fighting at a high level. His most recent appearance back in April in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 44, he turned away one of the division's more promising up-and-coming contenders in Arnold Allen. He'll look to do that once again, and maybe who knows what he's going to do. But I mean, he wants a fourth fight with Alexander Volkanovski, I'm sure. I'm not sure what he'll need to do to get it, but it's definitely not happening if he can't get past the Korean zombie. Seung Jung, 36-year-old Korean, is 17-7 overall. He is 7-4 in the UFC. He joined the UFC with the dissolution of the WEC all the way back in 2010, 2011. He would have more fights if not for the fact that he disappeared for 3.5 years of his prime right after his unsuccessful featherweight title shot against Jose Aldo to perform his compulsory military service for the South Korean army. He is coming in off of a loss. He had a shot at Alexander Volkanovski's title last April in the headliner of UFC 273. He did not have a good night at the office, lost pretty much the whole fight on his way to getting knocked out early in the 4th round. So Seung looking to stay in the title picture, looking to be something more than one of the more recognizable names in the UFC. He is, to put it mildly, not favored to do so. Holloway is out there around minus 850, minus 900. Seung plus 525, plus 550 or so on the comeback. Keith, Chan Seung Seung, he is such a household name. Like, he rose to stardom so quickly that it's kind of shocking how little he's actually done in the UFC. And I don't mean that to denigrate his accomplishments, not to say he's never done anything good.
Sure.
Like, I mean, he pulled off the first twister in UFC history, but just saying, literally, this is his 12th UFC fight.
Yeah.
It's his 12th UFC fight, and he's been in the main event of 10 of them. He was headlining by his third fight in the UFC. I mean, it helps when your UFC debut has the first twister in UFC history, and your second, you knock out Mark Hominick in 7 seconds.
I mean, start.
That's pretty good for a guy who left the WEC on the back of 2 straight losses, including one to Garcia. But yeah, he was just a household name right away. Dana White was wearing a Korean Zombie shirt to press conferences for events that Seung was not fighting at. Yeah. Within a year of when the guy was in the UFC. But when you look at it, he was thrust into the title picture very, very quickly. I mean, if you beat Mark Hominick and Dustin Poirier back to back with highlight reel finishes, that's going to get you a title shot. Since then, I mean, he's had some wins, he's had some losses. Mm-hmm. His losses have been bad, but his wins have been pretty good. I mean, I'm not even going to ask you if Seung has a title run left in him, because he's one of the more unlikely multiple-time title challengers in UFC history anyway. But what does he have to offer Holloway at this point? And what could Holloway do to really impress you here?
Well, is this his last fight? Because I know he was talking about retiring, and then he won another fight. But
I know he was making noises about that like late last year after the Volkanovski fight. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, he's 36, and for a guy, again, that was in the army for 3 years, like, he's been in a lot of wars. That's kind of his calling card.
Yeah.
I mean, he only has 11 UFC fights, but it's not the years, it's the miles, whatever it is they say. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about that. I mean, we talk about the miles. Think about going back to the WC, his legendary fight with Leonard Garcia is another one. It's funny, we talk about a guy. You said he has bad losses. Yeah, but he hasn't lost to bad people. Like, that's how do you word it? You say he's got.
Oh, dude, his losses are.
It was a Derek Brunson. What was the thing you said about Derek Brunson? He's lost badly, but not to bad people.
Yeah, he doesn't have any bad. He's lost badly, but he doesn't have bad losses.
Yeah,
and it's the same thing. Like, the people that Seung has lost to are Volkanovski, Aldo, Yair Rodriguez, Brian Ortega.
Yeah, like, so, superstars.
Two of the 3 greatest featherweights of all time, and two of the greatest never to win a title.
Yeah, no, obviously we're talking about UFC ones. Not talking about when he got knocked out by George Roop. That's a weird one. But I mean, the Jose Aldo one was an unfortunate injury. I mean, I thought he was going to lose that fight anyways, but he wasn't getting blown out. And that was like prime Jose Aldo at the time, And then the Yair Rodriguez one, he was 1 second away from winning, but that one was a little more unlucky than anything. But I mean, we talk about his 2 most recent ones are the ones that matter the most to me. 2 of the ones I focus a lot about this one, Brian Ortega and Alex Volkanovski. I mean, they weren't competitive. I mean, he got trashed in both of those fights. He one thing he said that was concerning, and I'm not quoting him word for word, but basically saying something like, he can't hang at the highest level. So something like having that, like not losing confidence in himself. Now there might be some translation going on, and I know there's cultural things going on too. But still, it's not something you have a lot of confidence in a guy saying going against Max Holloway, who is who takes guys who are confident and crushes their souls. One thing I love about Korean Zombie, exciting style, and you said he fought for the title twice. The first one being the Jose Aldo one, the other one, the freak thing with Jose Aldo. The second time, Alex Volkanovski, but he got trashed. He never had he was never a top guy in the organization. He doesn't even speak English. He doesn't even have as far as I know, he doesn't even have like that Anderson Silva like limited English thing going on. But yeah, he's a fan favorite, and every casual fan knows who the Korean Zombie is. No, they might not know his name is Chan Sung Jung, but they know Korean Zombie.
My wife, she and I, we will have been together for 15 years this December, and I've been a big MMA fan that entire time. I've been working in the MMA space for the last 5.5 years. She learned his real name today, looking over my shoulder as I put together my outline, because she hates his nickname.
Yeah,
she's like, will you tell him that his nickname sucks? I'm like, I don't think he'll listen to me. But if I ever see him,
she's absolutely wrong.
She's wrong. She's wrong.
She's
about
wrong.
That. She's right about most things.
It's one of the greatest nicknames. It might be the greatest nickname in the history of MMA. It's a good one.
It might be because it's cool and it's fitting.
Yeah, I always think the best nicknames is when you're known by your nickname more than your actual name.
Oh,
like Mirko Cro Cop,
Shogun, Tank Abbott, Shogun, Koreans. Yeah, where people might not know that Tank Abbott's real name is David. Yeah. No, completely agree.
Those are the ones that to me are good nicknames. Man, Max Holloway. We always talk about people that are good tape study guys, like who I've always said that Israel Adesanya is my favorite tape study guy, with Alex Volkanovski a very short second, and probably my top three is Max Holloway's up there. Max Holloway is one of the greatest fighters in the history of the sport, besides all the other, but just all-time great fighters. If Alex Volkanovski didn't exist, he wasn't born, his mom and dad didn't meet each other, Max Holloway might be a top 5 fighter of all time. Because I think he'd be at 12 title defenses or some shit like that right now.
Even if he'd gotten the split decision in the second Volkanovski fight, and came out 1 and 2 against Volkanovski, but all 3 of them went to decision, even that would change things a little bit.
Well, I mean, even so, he's probably a top 15 fighter of all time, anyways. Maybe top 20. I don't know. I mean, I'm not coming up with a list, but my point is he's in the club when it comes to greatest fighters of all time. And you know how I feel about Alex Volkanovski. I think Volkanovski's a lock for top 10. He might even be top 5 right now already. But that's wrong time to talk about that. But Max Holloway is besides being one of the greatest fighters, he's one of the greatest strikers we've ever seen. High volume guy, just marches down his foe slowly, just taking the ground. I said this before, and I just like this analogy about the way he takes ground. He reminds me of a general in the 1700s where they're trying to win the battlefield and just slowly, taking that ground in the fight, and that's how you're winning. I mean, his boxing is off the charts. He's just as good at southpaw as he is orthodox. He's always my example when I try to explain what the word builder. He's just gets stronger as the fight goes on, as his confidence goes up. Long and lengthy guy. That he's great. He's great at all ranges. He's I think about Max Holloway, and I go, oh yeah, look at him. He's huge for the weight class. Great from the outside, but he keeps his opponents guessing. He'll slide right in the mid range and box it up, or he'll go all the way to the pocket and he'll slug it out in the pocket. He's accurate. His straight right is one of the best in the game. I love his body work. I mean, look at the Arnold Allen fight. His last fight, he butchered Arnold Allen's body. I love that he attacks with combinations. He has so much variety, and he's always adding new attacks in each fight. It seems like I love when he lands a combo and then instantly changes stances and then attacks from the other side. So you can't even adjust to that. Perfect example of that. He was doing that over and over again. The Calvin Kattar just had complicated guessing. We just talked about Calvin Kattar, how his striking was against Giga Chikadze. So that's, he has that like Nate Diaz, just touching, and then, explode when there's an opening. He isn't a one punch fight ending guy. He's more of that like workhorse running back. You know what I mean? Where, I think of like an Emmitt Smith, where it's like 5 yards, 6 yards, 8 yards, 12 yards, and then boom, finally everything's going to work perfect, and he's got a 30-yard run. Like that's Max Holloway. He's going to butcher you up with strikes, and then all of a sudden when there's a perfect open, bam, and he rocks you. He's not going to probably put you out, but he's going to hurt you. What I love his last fight, he's never been the best kicker. I mean, he kicking about part of it, but he's never been like a huge best kicker. But he looked like freaking Mirko Krokop against Arnold Allen in his last fight. He's got a legendary chin, and that's because for such a good boxer, he does stand up a little too tall, and he kind of lacks head movement. He eats some shots, but he never's hurt. Like even. I mean, the only time I think I've ever seen him hurt was Dustin Poirier, and even that wasn't like rocked, done, just like, okay, wow, he's getting stung a little bit. He's got great takedown defense. One thing he likes to do, he uses that size when you go into his legs, he's attacking your neck, getting you second guess. He's one of those guys, you go for takedown against you. You talked about earlier about when you go for takedown. He makes you pay for going for a takedown against him. He obviously has the cardio and the experience to go 25 minutes, and he has so much heart. I mean, you go looking back to his all-time battles he's had against guys like Dustin Poirier, Alex Volkanovski. He's just a mentally strong person. Chan Sung Jung, I mean, I hate to just talk off the charts about, Max Holloway, but then go to Chan Sung Jung, who I love. I mean, love the guy. I mean, who doesn't? I mean, both these guys. I mean, these are two of the most fan favorite guys ever. He looked flat against Brian Ortega. He got smashed against Alex Volkanovski, and that's two of his last three fights. Now he's a boxer. He always had like a great pull right hand. Does really good with the hand fighting. Got power. He's a bigger puncher of the two. The harder hitter of the two guys fighting. He really steps in his shots, but he was making mistakes against Brian. He was dropping his hands a lot against Ortega. I assume that was because Ortega's such a threat for the takedowns, which was really opened up Ortega's boxing. He was also like gun shy. He was too patient, and he was doing it a lot against Volkanovski too. He didn't do anything right against Volkanovski. Volk was too fast for him. Volk had too much variety, had him guessing. He couldn't pick up the timing of Volkanovski. I mean, that's the best, in my opinion, the best fight in the world. So, take that for what it's worth, and probably says more about Volkanovski than the Korean Zombie. But he's a good grappler. We always think about him slugging it out. He's always been a very good grappler. Though he doesn't grapple enough, but when he does, he got 8 submission wins, but his last submission was in 2012. So something. I mean, again, sure, there was a big gap in time, and he's even when he's besides the Army, he's had big gap.
It was putting Dustin Poirier all the way to sleep. Why would you stop? What got you maybe your best win of your career?
In fairness, that was a different Dustin Poirier.
I mean that might have
same person, but like different.
That might have been the fight that chased Poirier up to like lightweight for good.
Yeah,
I'm sure that's one of the ones that helped make his mind up.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And he's got strong takedown defense. If you take him down, he's hard to hold down. But I'm worried about his durability too. I mean, he took so much damage against Brian Ortega, so much damage against Alex Volkanovski. In fairness, he's had a really long layoff. I mean, it's been like a year and a half, something like that.
Yeah.
So he's been out for a long time. So that's probably a good thing. Not at his age isn't a good thing, but after those beatings he had. That said, even if those two fights didn't exist, even if the Brian Ortega fight didn't exist, even if the Volkanovski fight didn't insist. He didn't take that damage. He didn't show signs of decline. I gotta stop saying the Volkanovski one, because the Volkanovski one, I mean, he does that to everybody. But if those fights didn't exist, I still think this is a bad stylistic matchup for him. Max, I talked about the Korean Zombie pulling guys in his right hand. Max Holloway doesn't fall for that. He'll jab you up from the outside. I talk about hand fighting. Max Holloway's a master at that. Everything that the Korean Zombie is really good at, Max Holloway's just better at. I really only see him either. I mean, I said he can go for takedowns, but I've seen Max Holloway. He can grapple. You're not going to take him down. If you do, he's going to get right back up. So I really don't see him having a puncher's chance. Now, Max Holloway's been in wars. He's had some health issues. We've seen it before where guys just suddenly overnight become shot. Like maybe Holloway's chin doesn't hold up, and finish. Holloway's not the hardest guy to hit. He's never been. He's willing to take those chances. Maybe that legendary chin just crumbles, but I'd be really surprised. I understand why this is a huge. I don't think it should be negative. Would you say almost 600?
No, minus 850.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
He's Holloway's
Do I not listen?
on the card.
I swear, when you say the betting lines, I always ask you to say it again. I'm like, maybe I should just pay attention more when you're telling it.
I'm happy to say it again.
Maybe because I don't bet that I don't pay attention to enough of that.
Holloway minus 850, Seung plus 525.
That's extreme. But I mean, you're still talking about a top. What is he ranked in the world? What is he top 7, 8 in the world?
Seung, I mean, he.
Well, we don't have ranked anymore, right? Because he's in activity.
Yeah. Well, actually, he wouldn't have aged out for inactivity for a few more months. So let me.
Shout out. I think his name's Mike. Shout out to Mike, who's like. There's Keith mentioned in the rankings again without knowing where he's ranked. And I just voted on the rankings today.
Seung is our number 12.
Oh, wow. He's a little lower than I thought. But okay, so the 12th. He's still the 12th best guy in the world.
Yeah.
In the world. I mean, take out a couple guys in the UFC. I mean, I know that's probably.
Well, I mean, we got like Pitbull and McKee both ahead of him.
Yeah, so top 10 in the UFC.
Yeah, he'd be the 10th guy if it was UFC only.
The 10th guy in the world shouldn't be, no one should be an 8-1 favorite against him, or almost 9-1 favorite against him. That said, stylistically, this is bad. I think Holloway smokes him. I don't think he'll finish him, but I just think we have that one of those, just another one that you put those in the category of what he did to Cater, what he did to Arnold Allen, what he did to Brian Ortega, what he did to he just does this to everybody. I just see Max Holloway just trashing them for 25 minutes. Just dealing with Max Holloway, just playing with him and blowing him out. Maybe the travel will affect him. Maybe the time change will affect him. I think it's even more extreme going from Hawaii to Japan, right?
No, Hawaii is close. Well,
no, it's close, but it's behind. It's like Japan's ahead of us in time. Like in the East Coast, Japan's ahead of us in time, but Hawaii's behind us in time.
Yeah, I mean the way he's doing, he'll cross the international date line, so it'll definitely be weird.
But I mean, I know the travel, like it won't be like a 13-hour flight or some shit like that. But maybe those things that I'm not thinking about affect him. But if none of that has an effect on him and it's just skill versus skill, I say Holloway blows him out. Give me Holloway with like a 50-45, maybe something like a 50-44, 50-43 decision.
Awesome. Yeah. I love that this sort of became an impromptu kind of like love song to Max Holloway, because you know what? He's
I do that. In fairness, I do that every single time he fights. I love the guy.
And I'm A-okay with that. And there always a new wrinkle comes out. Like I love the comparison of him to Emmett Smith, because like the flip side of that would be to say that for a lot of his UFC career, like Brian Ortega was Barry Sanders, where like nothing's going anywhere. Gets stopped for a 3-yard loss. He tries to reverse the entire field, gets stopped for like an 8-yard loss. Then 2 plays later, holy shit, he's gone.
You know what I love right now? It's the European who's listening. Who's one who's like they have no idea what to talk about. But also, I'm talking about the 20-year-old European. So not only do they don't follow the sport, but they're also not 40 years old who would remember.
Yeah.
Like there's 20-year-olds who know what we're talking about, but they didn't really watch Barry Sanders.
Right.
Like we watched prime.
Yeah.
And side note, what a time. Talking about running backs. What a time. With those two guys in the prime at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, carry on.
Sorry. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess like I could start talking about like, well, this is Derrick Henry and this, that's no, you mentioned that Holloway's ability to switch stances to the point that stance almost becomes irrelevant. Like once he really hits,
that's true.
Once he really hits the Holloway zone, after a round and a half, depending on opponent, all of a sudden he's coming forward and he'll throw an 8-strike combo where he changes stances 3 different times and basically uses front kicks as a stance change. And it's like watching his opponent be just stuffed into a wood chipper. When we talk about the greatest strikers of all time in MMA, the point against a lot of the candidates is, well, they weren't really doing it against other great strikers. Like, Chuck Liddell, like a lot of Chuck Liddell's greatest highlights were against wrestlers who had no choice but to run straight at him. Like, I mean,
it's Tito or Randy.
Yeah, like Babalu. Like, Crow Cop definitely highlight reel some good strikers, but a lot of his highlight reel is also people that had no business being in the cage with him. Max Holloway.
Who's that Mexican guy with the mask?
Alberto Dos Caras Jr. Yeah, the guy I saw Tito versus Alberto down in Max Holloway has just done work against some of the other greatest strikers in the history of the sport. Like what he did to Jose Aldo twice, Jair Rodriguez, Calvin Kattar, Anthony Pettis, when Pettis was still pretty close to his prime. Like
even losses, like a loss to Dustin Poirier.
Yeah.
Like even losses of, I mean, the last one was really bad. The first one was competitive. Second one, a lot of people think he won. Third one against Volkanovski, he gets smashed. But Jesus Christ, real quick, we're talking about Max Holloway. Say, freaking Alex Volkanovski. I don't want to go off that again. Sorry, I keep interrupting you. I'm sorry.
He's something else, and luckily we'll get to talk about him at least a few more times. Anytime, a listener, I don't. Yeah, he's a listener, but he's not really a participant. He doesn't really interact with us. He messaged me on.
Shame on him. Whoever that is, shame on him.
He messaged me on Twitter a while ago, just kind of asking me how I analyze and predict fights. And I need to write him like a longer email, but I mean the short answer is, with most fights, I just watch tape on them. I see what they're good at doing. And then just as importantly, I see what they actually like to do under live fire situations. Like I've said it a million times about Norma Dumont. She stands like a karate fighter, but as soon as the bullets start flying, she wants to clinch and throw you on the ground, But specifically, whenever there's a huge favorite in a fight, whenever there's someone who's minus 800, minus 500, minus 1200 in a top level fight, I usually start from the question, okay, if the underdog wins, what does it look like? Like what weapons do they have that, or what vulnerabilities does the favorite even have that make this fight worth watching tape on? And sometimes there's a plausible avenue to victory, even for a huge underdog. But here, in order for Jung to win, he would have to do things that we've literally never seen happen to Max Holloway. We'd have to see Holloway badly hurt by a single strike, or we'd have to see Holloway badly out grappled on the ground in a pretty quick sequence. And we haven't seen anything like that since he fought Poirier as like a 20-year-old.
It's funny. It's crazy sound. And I'm not looking at, I might be just guessing, but I'm not going over his record, but is the last time he was out grappled against Conor McGregor? Is that really like the last time he was out grappled?
Yeah. And McGregor,
no, I think Dennis Bermudez was after that, right? Or was that before that?
The Bermudez was right before McGregor.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So Conor McGregor might be the last person who actually out grappled him.
Yeah.
Of all people, that's kind of funny.
Of all people, I mean, we're talking Conor McGregor, a guy that Floyd Mayweather got standing back control on. So, but all that to say that even as an underdog, like Jung's avenues to victory, the things that he's proven able to do well and might still be able to do well at this point in his career just don't line up with any of Max Holloway's demonstrated weaknesses. I mean, Holloway's, I mean, if you had to point to one weakness in his current form, it's that he's hittable. Even when he's winning, he's hittable. Like, he set a UFC record for strikes landed against Calvin Kattar, but what isn't as talked about is that Kattar landed like Kattar's strike total on Holloway in a one-sided loss was also one of the 10 or 12 highest totals in UFC history. Like, Holloway hit Kattar like 310 times and got hit like 200.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
But you know what? Holloway ate it. You made a good point. Like, Poirier at lightweight is the only person that really even seemed to affect Holloway with pure power. And it's not even that Holloway is rocked, his eyes are googly, he's staggering backwards. It's just like, oh, okay. When Poirier hits Holloway's game plan changes.
Yeah.
Like,
and Poirier is known for his, like, you hear people talking about like how hard he hits.
Yeah, Poirier's got rolls of nickels in his gloves. Like most people that he hits as many times as he hit Holloway are gone.
It was a super close fight.
Yeah, and it was a close fight.
Obviously, we're talking about the second fight.
Yeah. And so on top of everything else, yeah, like, even if Seung just fought lights out and had a career performance, it still might not be enough. And I just don't see him having a career performance. He's come up badly short the last two really good fighters he's fought against. And that was almost a year and a half ago. And Holloway is almost as bad a style matchup for him as Volkanovski is. I think Holloway is going to put on a vintage performance. I mean, Seung still is the Korean Zombie. There's a reason he got that nickname, because he comes forward and tries to eat you. And, you know, it takes a clean shot to the head to stop him. But yeah, I could see some 50-44, 50-43 type things. I could see this being one of the fights where controversy afterward is over whether Seung's corner should have thrown the towel or the ref should have done something. Because Holloway's just going to keep building and rolling downhill harder and harder on him. Give me Holloway here in just a very one-sided decision. And I assume that you'll be in for the recap this time.
Yeah.
I mean,
we'll talk about that in a minute.
You'll be in the captain's chair, but I expect your question will be, what in the hell do we do next with Max Holloway?
What we've been saying about 3 fights in a row now.
Yeah.
Move up to 155.
Yeah, that's basically it. Any other general thoughts on this one before we wrap?
Nope.
That is it. The Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 225, Holloway versus Seung, Holloway versus Korean Zombie. I've been your host, Ben Duffy. He has been Keith Shillan. If this is your first time watching one of our previews, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We do our best to bring you as good a blend of actual analysis of the fights and occasional trivia or humor or historical asides as you're likely to find anywhere. Please do like, subscribe, drop us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. We'd love to hear your take on these fights as well. But most importantly, join us on the recap. We are live on the Sherdog YouTube page, usually about 10 or 15 minutes after the main event. Keith takes the captain's chair. We'll break down all 13 of these fights in reverse order from the headliner all the way down to the first prelim. This particular time, because it's such an early morning card, I think we may start just early afternoon. So it may start an hour or two after the card ends. For a lot of our American, Canadian, viewers, that'll give you a chance to wake up, start the card, catch up on the fights, and be ready to talk with us about them. But we will let you know via social media and just via when the live stream is scheduled to start, when you can expect to tune in. But yeah, we'll talk about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. We will talk about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers. And we'll be talking with you. The live chat on the YouTube page is open that whole time. So we are taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that like to hang out with us after the fights, and we would love for you to be a part of it. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, enjoy these fights.